Hello, everyone. It's a little bit past 1. We're not quite at a quorum yet, but I think we'll be getting there shortly. If I could give you a couple of reminders, we are asking that make sure that you've signed in over at the tables to your left, to my right there. If you don't have a voting card, then you won't be able to vote. We are asking that you keep your masks on when you're moving around, just in case there are people here who are immunocompromised. We want everyone to feel comfortable. And then also, quick reminder, in the warrant book, if you happen to bring your warrant book, at page 36, there's a volunteer form, and the town can always use more volunteers to help with things. So if you're so inclined, fill that out, and you can leave it at the check-in table, and they'll collect them there. I hope we'll be able to get started in a few minutes. Welcome. Good afternoon. I understand that we have a quorum. Thank you all very much for coming. I hereby call to order the Town of Carlisle Annual Town Meeting of June 6, 2021. For the record, the required quorum is 100 per vote of the Select Board. As of a couple minutes ago, we were at 103, and we're still checking people in, so we're good to go. Good afternoon. I'm Wayne Davis, the town moderator. I've been doing this job since 2009, and I've been attending town meetings since 1994. I can honestly say I have never been happier to be at a town meeting than I am today. It is really just great to see you all without masks on. And I hope you enjoy seeing each other. I have not been in the presence of this many people in 15 months, so it feels good to me. It does seem that our dubious record on picking great weather days for holding outdoor town meeting remains unbroken. I'm sure we're all appreciative for the bonus utility of these solar canopies, a benefit that even the Energy Task Force did not foresee when we approved this project. But thank you, Energy Task Force, for giving us the shade today. I know that people have moved into town over the last year, and I don't know if we have any newcomers, but could I get a quick show of hands? Is there anyone here who is, this is their first Carlisle town meeting, whether you've been here a year or 10 years and this is your first meeting? Anyone? No? Oh, we got someone? Okay, welcome. Glad to have you. Thank you for attending. I hope you enjoy this. And of course, welcome to the rest of you for whom this is not your first rodeo. Let me just go to the other extreme, and I know we've got a couple people for this. We have some people here who have been coming to Carlisle town meetings for 40 years or more. Could I ask those of you to please stand up, and the rest of us would like to just thank you for your dedication to the town. You know, I thought there have been some magazines that I've been subscribing to for 30 or 40 years, and they never offer me a discount, so I just thought it was about time that somebody got recognized for longevity. Okay, enough of the fun stuff. Please bear with me for a few minutes while we cover some of the important formalities and logistics. I've inspected the return of service of the warrant and determined it has been properly served. I will assume the consent of the meeting to waive the reading of the warrant. Is there any objection? Hearing no objection, the reading of the warrant is hereby waived. Restrooms. Now we're on to the really important stuff. The restrooms are up in the cafeteria, behind me on the stairs to your left. So you just need to, as you go in, veer a little bit to the left and follow the signs. Water, I hope everyone has brought your own, but if you haven't, courtesy of Chief Soros and Chief Fisher, we do have extra drinking water. And where do we have that located? It's back in. Okay, over here, but okay, great. Thank you very much. Please keep yourselves hydrated. Masks. I know that the general guidance now is that fully vaccinated people can go unmasked. And we're fine to do that while you're seated. I do ask out of courtesy to those among us who may be immunocompromised or for some other reason haven't been able to get vaccinated, that when you move around, and especially when you're leaving and people may be in close quarters, if you could just put your masks on. Otherwise, feel free to be unmasked. As I had mentioned before, on page 36 of your warrant book, we do have the volunteer form. The town certainly does need help from volunteers, and so I encourage you to take a look at that, sign up, and drop it off at the check-in table. Two quick reminders. The Carlisle Master Plan. I've been asked to remind everyone that this Thursday at 7:30, the Master Plan Steering Committee will be holding a virtual community presentation and discussion of the Carlisle Master Plan. Information about this is printed at page 8 in your warrant book and also a handout that was available at the sign-in tables. Town election coming up, not this Tuesday, but Tuesday another week on June 22nd at Town Hall. Note that the polling hours are from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m., not the usual from full-day polling session. Headsets, as usual, we do have them available if anyone needs a little extra amplification, and can just go to the back corner there where John Dorshak is, and you can ask for a headset. Let's see. Introductions. So normally we have tables up front with some of the town officials. We don't have that quite as much today, but I would still like to do some introductions. Over here on your left is our town clerk, Peggy Wang. And we have over on this other side here, our town administrator, Tim Goddard. Town council is Tom Harrington, assisted by Ethan Dively. And then our select board, if you all could stand up and wave, Dr. Alan Lewis, our chair, Kate Reed, Barney Arnold, Dave Modell, and Luke Ascalillo. Our finance committee, our chair is Jim Darr, who is up front here. And then we have other members in attendance, Lynn Lipinski, who is the vice chair. Lynn's around somewhere. If you could all just stand up. James Catacchio, Aaron DeAlia, Victor Liang, Melissa Sampson McMorrow, and Scott Triola. So thank you. And thank you for all the hard work you put in bringing the budget to us. Okay, running the meeting, we're basically doing things close to normal, not as many changes as the past. For those of you who are new to town meeting functions as the legislative body, and we follow a form of parliamentary procedure guided by state statute, as well as state and local practices built up over the last 300 years or so, all of which you can find whittled down to a 2-page summary that's in the back of the warrant book, the Quick Start Guide at page 37. To remind everyone of the main points of our procedure, speaking, if you wish to be recognized, please just wave your voting card in the air until I see you. If I haven't seen you, stand up. And if I still don't see you, just shout out, Mr. Moderator. When you do speak, please remember to speak civilly and respectfully. Remarks or questions should be addressed to me as the moderator and not directly to prior speakers or town officials. Our time limits are 8 minutes for main presentations and 3 minutes for comments from the floor, but I advise everyone to try to keep it to 6 minutes and 2 minutes. I hope that you've picked up the motions handout on your way in. That's this document that's got a town seal on the front, because the motions are what we'll actually be voting on. When we do vote, I'll be asking you to raise your voting cards. And for those of you who enjoy shouting yay or nay, I invite you to do that, because that's always fun to do, but I'll actually be looking at the cards this time. Non-voters not allowed to address the meeting without prior consent. Typically, however, we do hear from non-voters who are employees, volunteers, or advisors to the town. Unless there is objection, I will assume the consent of the meeting to recognize the following people to speak. Non-voter appointed members of any town or regional committees or task forces. Non-voter employees of the town of Carlisle, including the Carlisle Public Schools. Non-voter management employees of the Concord-Carlisle Regional School District, and town council. All of these with permission to speak, limited to topics relevant to their official capacity with the town. Is there any objection to letting those categories of non-voters speak? Hearing no objection, I assume the consent of the meeting. 2 last points. If anything interferes with your ability to hear, see, or otherwise participate in the proceedings, you may interrupt the meeting with a point of privilege to request that we rectify the situation. And also, if I say or do anything that confuses you or you think is wrong, you may rise to a point of order to question or challenge it. Don't worry, I don't take it personally, and I actually appreciate the opportunity to correct any mistakes that I've made, or at least explain things if I think I haven't made a mistake. So let me pause here and ask, are there any questions about our procedures this afternoon? Any questions? Okay, seeing none. I understand that Mr. Friedman would like to make a procedural motion, so I recognize David Friedman, if you can come to the microphone up front.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like to motion.
Could you come a little closer to the, just get closer to that mic.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
No, not yet. Hello?
Hello.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like to make a motion to move Article 16, the CPA annual recommendation, to later in the meeting after Article 21, which seeks to amend the Carlisle general bylaws to establish the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay, so we have a motion to delay consideration of Article 16 until after Article 21. Is there a second to this motion? So, okay, so the motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Friedman, you have 3 minutes or hopefully less to explain the purpose of your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 16 includes a request for town meeting approval to provide $100,000 in CPA funds to the Affordable Housing Trust. Article 21 essentially creates the trust under a different and more powerful local authority than that under which it currently exists. I believe it would be quite odd to grant CPA funding to an entity that the meeting will be asked later to redefine. It is also my understanding that there will be an amendment proposed to Article 21, and I believe that the discussion of that amendment and whether or not it is supported by the majority will be relevant to whether or not town meeting should approve the requested sums under Article 16. A simple solution to this is to move Article 16 after Article 21, hence my motion.
Okay, thank you. So the motion before the body now is simply to move the order of the articles so that 16 comes after 21. This is debatable if anyone wishes to debate it, and it will be a majority vote when we take a vote. Does anyone want to speak to the motion? Okay, seeing no one, I think the decision is quite clear, and we've heard the reason for it. All those in favor of the motion to defer consideration of Article 16 until after Article 21, please raise your voting card. And you can say yay if you want. And any opposed, please raise your voting cards. Okay, motion carries by majority, and I so declare, so we will take up 16 after 21. Okay, we can now move to the, I'm sorry, we have 2 more preliminaries to do before we get on to Article 1. First, I'd like to recognize Tim Goddard, our town administrator, to deliver the annual report to town meeting on the Patriot Act.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tim Goddard, Town Administrator. I met earlier with Chief Fisher, and he confirmed with me that no Carlisle resident has been arrested, detained, or questioned in connection with the Patriot Act within the last calendar year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. I now recognize Dr. Alan Lewis, Chair of the Select Board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It's my pleasure to recognize town employees and volunteers who are retiring from immediate public service. It doesn't keep you from volunteering again next year if you want to. But we have some long-term employees who are going to retire from the town service. From the Council on Aging, COA Outreach and Program Manager Angela Smith for 15 years. And as you may probably know, the entire Office of Aging had to be reorganized when Angela retired. She was that important to this town. Department of Public Works, Equipment Operator James Proctor, 23 years. Gleason Public Library, Librarian Kay Edelberg, 38 years. Planning Board, the Planning Administrator George Mansfield, 26 years. Police Department, Richard Tornquist, 35 years. In the Finance Department, our town accountant, Priscilla Drunka, 21 years. And elected and appointed officials from the Affordable Housing Trust, George Payne, 2 years. The Agricultural Commission, Desiree Ball, 4 years, and Meredith Pierce, 1 year. Celebrations Committee, Doug Stevenson, 33 years. The Council on Aging, Walter Hickman, 7 years, and Donna McMullen, 7 years. The Cultural Council, Jill Henderson, 1 year, and Abigail Zimmerman, 2 years. The Recreation Commission, Mark Spears, 29 years. The Senior Tax Advisory Committee, Barbara Culkins, 10 years. The School Committee, Christine Lear, 4 years. Trails Committee, Alan Blevins, 1 year. Scholarship Advisory Committee, Diane Powers, 10 years. And the Zoning Board of Appeals, Lisa Davis Lewis, 10 years. We thank you all for your great service to this town. As you know, this is a town that is pretty much run by volunteers, and both our employees and our volunteers are very, very much appreciated, and I think we owe them all a round of applause. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. David Modell of the Select Board.
We would be remiss to not note that Dr. Alan Lewis is also retiring from his service to the Select Board. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you. Okay, now we're on to Article 1. I'll be reading the motions directly and then ask for a second. Article 1 is the consent agenda. Motion by Alan Lewis. I move that Articles 2 through 9 be considered in one motion and that the motions for Articles 2 through 9 be hereby adopted as printed in the motions booklet. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Okay. Article 1 is essentially a procedural rule under which we vote on Articles 2 through 9 inclusive as a single package. This motion has been supported unanimously by the Select Board and FinCom, as well as they also have unanimously recommended adoption of Articles 2 through 9. Did any other boards or committees have recommendations on any of the Articles 1 through 9? Okay, seeing none. With the consent of town meeting, I will divide the question so that we will first consider whether to adopt the consent agenda procedure and then separately consider the adoption of Articles 2 through 9. Any objection to the chair's ruling to divide the question? Seeing no objection, we'll now vote on the procedural question of whether to use the consent agenda. All those in favor, please raise your voting card or say aye, and say aye. Any opposed? Raise your voting card. Motion carries unanimously. So now we're on to Articles 2 through 9 as a package. So the way we handle this is I will just quickly read through the articles. And what you can do is, if you would like us to discuss any of these articles separately and vote for it separately, just shout out hold. If you don't shout out hold, then we're just going to vote on everything as a package. If you do say hold, then we'll pull it out and we'll just consider it separately. So Article 2 is for the acceptance of town reports. Any holds? Okay, Article 3, salaries of elected officials. Article 4, actuarial valuation of post-employment benefits. Article 5, revaluation. Article 6, the real estate tax exemption. Article 7 is the fiscal year 2021 Chapter 90 authorization. Okay, Article 8 is the department revolving funds authorization. And Article 9 is PEG, the Public Education Government Local Access Appropriation. Thank you, Minuteman Network. Okay, no holds on any of these. So I take it we have no need for debate. We can move directly to the vote. This is a majority vote, so all in favor, please raise your voting cards. Any opposed? No opposition? Okay, this carries unanimously, and I so declare. We are now on to Article 10, which is the town clerk salary adjustment. Motion is by Alan Lewis. I move that the town vote to fix the salary of the town clerk as provided by Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 108, as amended for the fiscal year 2022, beginning July 1, 2021, at $75,000, as presented in the table printed in the motion handout. So motion by Alan Lewis. Is there a second? Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Dr. Lewis, would you like to speak to this?
This is essentially a market adjustment. As an elected official, the town clerk has not had the benefits of the normal types of pay raises that other town employees have had over the years. And we did a survey of equivalent positions in neighboring towns, and this is about the median of those town clerk salaries in the neighboring towns, and we felt it was appropriate, given her service to this town, that we adjust her salary to put it in line with what other towns are doing for this equivalent position. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the Select Board voted unanimously, 4-0, to support passage of Article 10. FinCom, do we have a recommendation? Mr. Dar?
The Finance Committee voted unanimously to support Article 10.
Thank you. Do we have recommendations from any other boards or committees? Okay, seeing none, the floor is open to debate on Article 10. Anyone? Okay, so I guess we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of Article 10, which is to adjust the salary of the town clerk to $75,000 annually beginning July 1, 2021, please raise your voting card and say aye if you care. Any opposed? Please raise your voting card. Okay, motion requires a majority. It carries by a majority, and I so declare. Okay, we are on to, let's see, Article 11 is budget transfers, and we will have, I understand no motion will be made on that. Is that correct, Mr. Dar? No motion? Okay, so we will just skip over Article 11. Article 12, we're on to the operating budget. Motion is by Jim Dar on behalf of the Finance Committee. I move that a total of $31,446,893 be appropriated for fiscal year 2022 as set forth in the column entitled Fiscal Year 2022 Recommended as printed in the motion's handout. And to meet this appropriation, $53,000 be transferred from the ambulance fund, $27,675 be transferred from the reserve fund for bond premiums account, and that the balance be raised from the fiscal year 2022 tax levy and other general revenues of the town. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Dar, I invite you to speak. As is the usual practice, we give a little bit more time than the usual 8 minutes since the budget is big.
Well, not too big, is it?
Not too big. Okay.
Good afternoon. Before I get into the details, I need to mention that there are two changes in the warrant book from the warrant book version of the budget. The handout that you've picked up, we already made the adjustment for the passage of the change in the clerk's salary, and we deducted the equal amount from the general group insurance line. And also we have just this past week learned that the high school, listed as CCRSD on the budget, is going to reduce the amount of funds by roughly $68,000 that they're requesting from Carlisle next year. So we have made that change as well. Relatively minor in the whole picture. Once again this year, the budget process was a little different. We started in January instead of October, but we have been able to hold 14 meetings in this time period, meeting with every department and every commission in putting together the budget that we're recommending to you this afternoon. Two general comments that you should bear in mind. One is that the law requires that we propose a balanced budget. This is a balanced budget. The law also requires that we take into account as if all of the financial motions in the warrant pass, and we have done that. Starting with expenses, they're going to go up next year, we anticipate, by about 3.2%. That's in contrast to the current year, where it was a flat budget, 0% increase, obviously because of the pandemic and the uncertainties. But the 3.2% should be put in the context of a 10-year average of 2.7% per year. So a little bit higher than average, but not exceptionally so. I'll highlight a few of the increases. Education is first. This community has supported education for many, many years, has a great desire to have a quality system from K to 12. The biggest change in the budget of the $1 million of additional spending, half of it comes from the Carlisle School. However, that's 4.3% on their budget. The drivers for that are the collective bargaining agreements that have legal force, some adjustments in class size necessitated by changing enrollments, and as so often, the requirements of special education. On the other end, the high school budget or requirement for us is going down for the second consecutive year, about 3.5%. This is almost totally due to enrollment changes. Our enrollment at the high school has dropped a little bit, and Concord's has gone up. The apportionment then favors us. But at the same time, I don't think we can anticipate this in future years, and in some respects, it's not wholly good news. Other items that are going up include the pension, the retirement system. We belong to the Middlesex retirement system. We have an obligation to amortize our pension obligation over this 30-year period we've committed to. That's going up about 13%. They send us a bill, we need to pay it. Our debt service is going up about 10%. That's largely because our treasurer, Kim Kane, was able to change short-term notes into long-term bonds at a very favorable rate. So that will benefit us over the long term. Another one that may look like it's going up a lot is OPEB. You may remember that stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. This is mainly health insurance for retirees. Good accounting practice requires that we reflect it as a liability both for the current retirees and future retirees. Right now, that totals about $20 million. Once the trust is certified that we have created, it'll drop to $9 million. Still a big number. The $215,000 in this year's budget is probably the minimum that you'll see in future years to help pay off this obligation. The last item I want to bring to your attention is that group insurance line I mentioned. It's going down, but the real reason for that is that in the current year, as a committee, we chose to build that line up because we just weren't sure what the pandemic would impose on the town in terms of unexpected costs, particularly around insurance. We feel we do not need that next year, so we have reduced it back to what it would be primarily a health insurance line item. On the revenue side, we, I think, all know that the majority of our revenue comes from property taxes, residential property taxes. Next year, that'll be about 89% of the total revenue. That'll be about a 2.4% aggregate increase in the property tax. That doesn't mean that individual households will see a 2.4% increase, but this is in total. This is the first year in which a revaluation of properties has been implemented, so that also will have some effect on your individual property tax bill. But 2.4% this year. If we look at the last 3 years, including a little bit of a drop in fiscal 21, it totals 4.8% or 1.6% per year. That's a relatively low number historically, so we're not guaranteeing that for the future, but I think that this year's increase is well within our historical experience. Another source of revenue that's not trivial is the state, and we've been pleased that the state has sustained its contribution to Carlisle and other municipalities during this pandemic period. Our allocation will actually go up slightly in the new fiscal year. So that was a concern a year ago, but it seems to be, at the moment anyway, going away. Another source of revenue is what we call free cash. And free cash is an accumulation of unspent but appropriated funds from prior years, as well as unanticipated revenues. We're suggesting this year that $818,000 in free cash be used to pay for Articles 14 and 15, which you'll hear about in a few minutes. Free cash right now is larger than normal, and it's really because this time last year, some functions of town government were slower or not happening because of the lockdown. The Finance Committee has had a long-term policy of trying to keep our liquid reserves, which is the stabilization fund, and free cash at between 10 and 12% of the operating budget. If we move $818,000 as a result of this meeting, we'll still have $3.6 million in those reserves, which will be 11% right in the middle of the range. Another thing we always talk about these meetings, and it's very important, is the levy limit. We're all familiar with Prop 2.5, but it's probably worth reminding ourselves that there is a maximum amount that the residents can be taxed under Prop 2.5, which is we call the levy limit. 1 year's levy limit starts with the prior year's limit, adds 2.5%, and then adds any new properties that have come onto the tax rolls in the current year. This year we never have a lot of new properties, and this year we expect fewer than normal. I should note that if you look at most of the surrounding communities, they also don't have a tremendous amount of new growth. This is a mature state. The levy limit, however, is a cap, and every year since 2012, we have budgeted under the levy limit. In other words, the town is not taxing its residents as much as it could under Prop 2.5. As a result of this year's budget, that levy limit, or what's called the excess levy capacity, will be $3.2 million. So on the one hand, we're happy that that's an amount that people aren't being taxed, but it's also a kind of reserve that should there be some sort of sustained emergency, a lot worse than the pandemic, was there, and the town could call upon it. So from the financial standpoint, I think the Finance Committee feels that the town has weathered the pandemic, which we think is getting to be in the rearview mirror, quite well. And the revenues from property tax have held up. As I said, the state's contribution has held up. But we have to note that we have continued long-term challenges financially. There are contracts and wage costs that rise every year. There is health insurance, retirement costs. I've mentioned these. They go up significantly every year. We have the cost of maintaining town structures. The town meeting began to approve expenditures for town buildings a few years ago. There's Article 15 has that again this year, and that's going to be, I think, on the agenda for quite a few years to come. This puts a lot of pressure on revenue that doesn't grow very quickly. So we understand that town residents want high-quality services. They also want them at the most reasonable or modest cost possible. That's a balancing act every year. Or another way to look at it is a sort of a balance between the short term and the long term. Our feeling as a committee is that the budget we're putting out today does balance that for fiscal '22, and we hope that you will approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Darr. So our recommendations on Article 12, the Select Board voted unanimously 4-0 to support passage, and the Finance Committee also voted unanimously 7-0 passage of Article 12. Did any other boards or committees have any recommendations? Okay, so As a reminder of how we deal with the budget here. So first of all, just for clarity on the table that you've got here, it's the rightmost column on your page. The recommended FY 2022, that's the number that we're voting on. FY 2021 is just for your reference. So the way we'll do this, similar to the consent agenda, I will go through and read each department line item. If you simply have a question that you'd like to ask the Finance Committee that is relevant to that, you don't necessarily want us to vote separately on it or have an amendment or something like that, you can just shout out question and we'll come back and give you the opportunity to pose your question. If you'd actually like to have a debate on something in that department and have a separate vote, then just shout out hold, and then we'll handle that separately. So the idea is where there's no disagreement, we can quickly vote on all of those as a package. Where we need to pay attention and consider separate items, we can do that efficiently. Clear to everyone? Okay, so let's get started. Again, just shout out question or hold. The first is general government with the recommended appropriation of $1,610,414. Protection of persons and property, $3,168,700. Okay, we have a hold on that. Public works, $1,263,420. Health and Human Services, $396,636. Education, $19,402,966. Nothing on education? Okay. Culture and recreation, we have at $865,091. Insurance and fringe, $3,182,188. I'm sorry, was that a hold on that? Question? Yes, okay. And I'm sorry, that was on the insurance and fringe, right? Okay. And now everyone's favorite category, unclassified, $152,000. Debt, $1,473,578. And then we have our total bottom line would be $31,446,893. So why don't we just go immediately to the insurance and fringe category, and I would ask you to please come to the microphone and address the floor.
So my question...
Oh, thank you. Please introduce yourself,
sure,
name and street address.
Sure,
I'm sorry.
Kimberly Fitch, 923 North Road.
Thank you.
And my question regards the OPEC trust. I just could benefit from the clarity in what certification means, and is it a one-time event, and what causes that nice decrease?
Mr. Dar, if you could address that, please. Thank you.
I don't know the legal specifics, but we created a trust at a town meeting some years ago, but we didn't have the proper language in it. So as a result, we've been putting money in, but the accounting authorities don't regard it as permanently set aside for this purpose. So certification is really a pro forma step, and once certified, it means the money we've contributed cannot be taken out of it for any purpose other than the one for which it was created, that is to pay post-employment health insurance.
Address our second question, which you had yes, what accounted for the decrease?
Oh, what was the decrease last year?
No,
No.
this year. She may have read it backwards. It's an increase this year.
It's a big increase this year, but if we want to look into this, the year before, it was much larger. It was over 400,000 in fiscal '20. We have been, as a committee, struggling with what's the right number to amortize this obligation. Last year, we reduced it a lot solely because we were trying to create a flat budget for fiscal '21. And that was a place that we could take it because we're not under a legal obligation to do that. Now we think we need to take a fresh look at what would be an appropriate contribution year after year to amortize this obligation, and we think this 215 is somewhere in the right vicinity for that. We expect over the course of fiscal '22 to come back with a specific recommendation on it.
Thank you. Okay. Let's now go to, yes, was there a question? Oh, you want, still on the OPEB? Okay, I recognize Mr. Friedman.
David Friedman, 301 Hutchins Road. I believe the question that the previous questioner asked was to understand better at the point of certification, is that reached when we get to the 20 million and then it goes down to 9 million, and how does that work? I think that was the question.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. It has nothing to do with those numbers. That's the 20 million is an actuarial number, but once it is certified, i.e., once the money cannot legally be removed, then the actuaries will look at this and say, okay, well now we can apply a higher discount rate to the money that's in there, and then they'll reduce it to about 9 million. That hasn't been done yet, but it will undoubtedly happen.
So, Mr. Dar, I'm not sure I understood that answer. So, $20 million, you said, is an actuarial estimate of what the overall obligation is.
Right now, yeah.
Right now, and that's projecting out years into the future, so that's why it's an estimate.
That's granting us a sort of investment rate in the fund that we've created that's basically like a money market rate.
Okay, and what gets certified is the amount of money that we've actually put in.
And future contributions. And once that's done, once it's perceived that it legally cannot be taken out, they will then allow the use of a much higher discount or investment rate more akin to what pension funds use.
Okay, and then I guess the question is, so what you're saying is we are not yet certified.
Absolutely, not yet.
And I think the first question really was, okay, so are we expecting to get certified at some point in the future?
Yes, soon.
Soon, okay. I won't try to pin you down on how soon. Same issue?
Yes, well, actually, we'll be...
Please identify yourself.
I'm Kimberly Kane. I'm the finance director
Thank you.
for Carlisle. And I was the one that set up the trust. As it was going, you would do a pay-as-you-go for the liability, just paying what you had to, and putting money away, but it wasn't recognized by the actuarial when they do this study because it wasn't properly accounted for in a trust. The trust has been voted by the select board. It's been set up. It's been at a public, posted as a public document, and it will be certified as of like July 15th. So it will be recognized next June 30th. So instead of having a $20 million liability, they'll take over the $1.9 million that we have in the trust. They'll calculate it out and then give you the new value that the town would have to fund, and that would become about $9 million. And if you do $215,000 for the next 30 years, you would pay off that liability. It does change every 2 years because every 2 years you have a review of the actuarial study, and that would show new people retiring, people coming on, and you get a new value every 2 years, and then it recalculates. So I hope I explained that well enough. Any other questions?
Everyone follow that? Thank you for that. I have to admit that I've been partially mystified by this OPEB thing for the last 5 or so years myself, so I think I got it better now. Anything else on that? Okay, let us now turn to Protection of persons and property, there was a request for a hold on that. Please identify yourself, and you have 3 minutes. You can take your mask off if you wish. You're not required to.
Hello, I'm Henry Hedden. I see that in this category, the budget for police is greater than all the other items combined as it was in the previous fiscal year. I don't understand why this is so much more important than all the other items, especially in a town like Carlisle. That's really all I have to say.
Okay. Do we have, does anyone wish to address that? Mr. Dar?
I'm not going to speak to the word important. I think from our point of view, they're all, police and fire and the other services are very important, but they function differently. You know, we have an on-call fire department, whereas the police department is mainly composed of full-time police officers. And that drives a very different financial picture, but I don't think it's meant to reflect the degree of importance.
Okay, thank you. Any other debate on protection of persons and property? Okay, so since we had a hold, just bear with me. We're first going to vote just on this line item for protection of persons and property, and then we'll vote on the entire package. So just let me double check. Are we all good? No further debate on anything? Okay. So, majority vote, this is first for the line item protection of persons and property, $3,168,700. All in favor, please signify by raising your voting card and saying aye if you want. Any opposed? Raise your voting card. Okay, passes by a majority, and I so declare. So now we will vote on the budget as a whole. Bottom line, $31,446,893. All those in favor, please hold up your voting cards and say aye if you wish. Any opposed, hold up your voting cards and say nay. Not seeing any opposition, so we have one opposed? Okay, so passes by a majority, and I so declare. Thank you, everyone. We're on to Article 13, Special Appropriations. Alan Lewis moves that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $8,500 to be expended by the Select Board to conduct studies, provide services, and facilitate projects for the departments as listed in, might as well read it. For the following departments: assessors, $5,000 for assessors maps updates, and the treasurer accountant, $3,500 for financial consulting. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Dr. Lewis, did you want to speak to this? You don't have to if you don't want to.
Given what we just passed, probably not necessary to monitor. That's obviously for the higher consultants.
Okay, if you are going to say something, you have to come to the microphone, so.
I say, given the amount we just spent, this is a minor amount, but it essentially hires consultants to assist our financial departments in carrying out the business of the town.
Thank you. And the Select Board voted 4-0 to support passage of Article 13. FinCom unanimously voted 7-0 in favor of Article 13. Recommendations from any other town boards or committees? Seeing none, any debate on Article 13? Okay, all those in favor, please hold up your voting cards. Any opposed, hold up your voting cards, or say and shout out nay. Okay, motion carries unanimously, and I so declare. Article 14 is capital equipment. On behalf of Scott Triola, Mr. Triola moves that the town vote to transfer from FY 2021 undesignated fund balance the sum of $318,000 to be available at the close of this town meeting for the projects listed in the table in the motions handout. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Trilla, could you briefly address this?
Just wanted to briefly address why we're specifying fiscal 21 undesignated funds. If you look at this list of items first, we restricted the recommendation to items that were essential to town functioning and had an immediate need. So this is a high priority list of items. In that item, 2/3 goes to the roll-off truck. The roll-off trucks are the large trucks used by the DPW to transfer the waste off-site wherever it goes. We have 2 trucks. They're both very old. I think the newer of the 2 is about 12 years old. They're both end of life. The new roll-off truck will replace the newer of the old roll-off trucks. The oldest roll-off truck will be retired. This was a great plan until both roll-off trucks ceased operating. So right now we are renting a roll-off truck for about $11,000 a month. By specifying fiscal 21, and this is out of free cash, we can purchase the new roll-off truck essentially immediately, and one is available, and avoid renting a roll-off truck for another month. If we did not specify fiscal 21, the funds wouldn't be available until July next month, so we'd have to rent a roll-off truck for a month. So that's why we're specifying fiscal 21, but it doesn't change the financials at all. All these items remain out of free cash.
Thank you. Our recommendations on this: Select Board unanimous 4-0 in favor, and FinCom unanimous 7-0 in favor. Any other recommendations from any other boards or committees? Any debate? Yes, over here. Did someone wish to speak? Yes, sorry.
I'm Jonathan White, Bedford Road in Carlisle. I wish to address the moderator in the town as to why we keep wasting money on rebuilding engines for roll-off trucks, and why the DPW is always the last on the list and has to ask and ask and ask to get their vehicles replaced. They keep rebuilding engines and wasting money.
Any other comments? Sir. Get this microphone on?
Okay, I'll use this one. Hi, Kerry Kissinger, Elizabeth Ridge Road. Last October, we had 4 items on capital equipment bundled, one of which was another town cruiser. It seems like every year or two, we buy another police cruiser for the town. It used to be $50,000. Last year, it was $57,000. This year, we bundled all 4 items, one of which is another police cruiser, for $60,000, which is 5% more than last year. I drive a 2005 vehicle with 240,000 miles on it, and every time I look at replacing, I say, can't I get another year out of this? And so I guess I would ask, can't we get another year out of the police cruisers? But we always seem to bundle them. So it's all or nothing. You can't vote down a police cruiser. You got to vote for all 4 or none. I was the only no vote last year for the 4 items on the capital equipment list because of the police cruiser. I guess I'll vote no again this year. I may be the only vote, but I would encourage the FinCom and the town to, in the future, make these separate items so people can weigh in on them and justify each one as you go along.
Well, Mr. Kissinger, I would point out that you do have the option of proposing an amendment to this motion if you so desire. Mr. Trilla, if you'd like to speak.
I'm happy to speak to each one, and we do put a lot of consideration into the recommendations. We do not attempt to bundle items in an attempt to get undesired items passed. We do it just out of expediency. And in this case, obviously, with the roll-off truck, that's a larger than normal item. But I'm happy to speak to these individually or invite the departments to speak to them. I can speak to the roll-off truck where I believe this is the first year that we were really requesting a roll-off truck, and I think all parties thought we would have continued operation of both roll-off trucks. So when the roll-off truck that was functioning failed, just a few weeks ago, that's when we decided let's make this, and we recommend the roll-off truck. And there are other items in the DPW request that are not included here, like the bucket truck, because we have not owned a bucket truck, and we continue to lease one, and we've looked at whether it makes sense to put that in this year or look at it for next year. So there is a priority list of items. We are trying to keep this to the essential items that have immediate need, and certainly do not want to continue to waste money on repairing engines that are where it might make sense to buy new, and that's something we look at every year and we do our best with. So again, with the roll-off truck, it's unfortunate that it broke down. We would have liked to have gotten through this year, but we think it's the right recommendation now, and I'm sure in the upcoming year we do have a list and a schedule of additional equipment in the DPW in particular, like an additional pickup truck. And there are future equipment items that need to be addressed, and we do the best to balance that against the total ask for capital items. And in light of Article 15, or Article 15, which we're going to be looking at momentarily, which is essentially investing capital in the town buildings. That's a large initiative that we have ongoing, so all of these requests need to be balanced.
Thank you. Chief Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would just say one quick thing, and then two quick things. An important request last year that came up when I was standing over here by a resident was that we consider a hybrid vehicle. And actually, a hybrid vehicle was available. They are a hair more, and as most of you know, I don't use the term hair lightly, but they are a hair more, but the durability is up there. Another important factor is this police department is the first responder to all emergencies in town. And the one thing we really need is to get in that car and turn the key and go. So what flies in my house, which is John's 135,000-mile Toyota pickup truck, I do not carry that over to work. It's really, really important for our members, and I think for our residents, that we have a quick response. And our financial folks here in Carlisle are very thorough. Every year, we do spend quite a bit of time talking about the cars. I don't want people to think that the folks here in Carlisle that are watching their money are irresponsible. Scott and his crew, Jim Darr, I spend a lot of time talking about things like this. But I don't want you to think I take it lightly, but it's incredibly important that there's a difference between John's Toyota pickup truck and the cars that we use here to respond to emergencies. I thank you for your time, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Okay, you're recognized over here. Thank you. I appreciate the help. It's a little bit hard to see.
Hi, Lana Zamaro, 398 Lowell Street, and I'm not sure if I am the resident that Chief Fisher was speaking about, but I did raise the question of electrifying the police department fleet last year. I can support these bundled items, but I guess what I'm asking, is it appropriate to get some kind of a commitment that we will move to electrify, and I am thinking more in terms of a straight EV, not a hybrid, because the performance is really extraordinary now, our police fleet. And I would extend that to other vehicles in town. Is there any way that we can get an assurance that that is going to be seriously considered moving forward, given the move globally to electrify everything, including vehicle fleets?
Well, you can't get that here today. Not appropriate. It's fine to raise that as an issue, but that's not the issue before us. Your options are to go to the various town boards and committees before town meeting and advocate for that and see if you can get that commitment. And if you can't get it there, you're certainly welcome to bring a citizen's petition at an upcoming special or annual town meeting where you ask that the town make that commitment. Those are your options.
Thank you. And I would like to thank Chief Fisher for the time he spent with me on the phone last year on this issue.
Well, he did listen, apparently. Okay. So, any other? Yes, over here, please. Mr. White.
Just another question about the roll-off truck. This is Jonathan White again. How much, and this being the second time, are we going to spend on this newest roll-off truck on this coming year? How much are we going to spend on that rebuilding that engine again?
I'm sorry, I don't believe I understand the question. Buying a new roll-off truck and you're expecting a rebuild in the next year on the engine of the new roll-off?
We have 2 roll-off trucks. One of them is out of service. Both of them out of service. The second one is the engine's being rebuilt for the second time. How much are we going to spend on that again
Okay.
before we buy another one?
Yeah, so we may have heard different things, so I'd appreciate a clarification. I heard that the second roll-off truck is being retired and not to be rebuilt, but if it's going to be rebuilt, then we should know.
The older of the current 2 roll-off trucks will be retired. It is past end of life. The newer of the current roll-off trucks is being repaired, and it's my understanding that, and if someone from the DPW wants to speak to this in more detail, I'd welcome it, that will become the backup roll-off truck. And obviously the new roll-off truck, which we're seeking approval of, will be the one that does the majority of the service. So I can't speak to how much they might have to spend on repairing the engine. I know it would have to come out of, they have a budget that we just approved in the article, and any repairs would have to come out of that budget. So if they have an unexpected expense there, they're going to have to figure it out. But I don't have that information. My expectation is that the one that's currently being repaired that will act as the backup will have a lot less wear and tear on it because it will not be used to the extent that it has been used recently. So hopefully we'll get 4 or 5 years out of that before we have to potentially purchase another roll-off truck. But I don't have the specifics on it.
Okay, in back here. I'll first recognize over here, and then you'll be next. So feel free, well, no, just stay there until we're ready. Thank you.
Bob Zog, 923 North Road. I think a previous question is actually relevant to the vote, and I'm going to word it a little differently. I'd like to understand how the energy consumption and the carbon emissions of these expenditures is going to be considered, especially for the vehicles, and it is relevant to how we vote today on that this article. Thank you.
Okay, could I ask you, Mr. Zog, when you say is being considered, we've got a, what considered where? I'm not quite sure I understand.
Well, we have choices to make when we replace these vehicles on whether we buy an energy efficient, a low carbon vehicle, or whether we don't. And I'm interested in how we make those trade-offs, or whether we don't even consider the energy and carbon impacts when we make the purchase decision.
Okay. Before I ask anyone to address that, do you also have a question for the people, or is this okay, so we'll hold on that. And Henry, did you have a similar question? I just wanted to see if we can bunch. Okay, if that was the only question, then let me, we'll ask Mr. Triola to address the question before we move to a vote. But I think I recognized you first, so please come to the microphone. Henry, you'll be next.
Mr. Moderator, Lee Tatish Jeff, 130 Oak Knoll. I'd like to understand how I can move to separate these. The debate on
I'm sorry, could you take your mask off?
I'm so sorry.
Yes.
I'd like to understand procedurally, how can we separate these for today's vote? I'd like to separate the police cruiser into a separate motion.
Okay, so thank you for that question. That is fortunately, it is a very simple question. The motion is called a motion to divide the question.
So moved.
And you are asking that the vote for are you asking for each of the 4 items to be voted separately, or simply for the cruiser to be voted
To
separately?
divide the police cruiser separately from the rest.
Okay, so we have a motion to divide the police cruiser from the rest.
Thank you.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, so that motion has been made and seconded. So since we have a procedural motion, that actually takes some precedence here. So we can just move to, I don't recall whether this one is debatable or not, but does anyone need to debate it? Good, so let's just vote. So this is just a procedural vote, and if you vote yes, it means that you will then have the opportunity to vote separately on the cruiser from the rest of the line items in this article. Okay? All those in favor, please raise your voting card. Okay. All those opposed? I think the motion fails to carry, and I so declare. So we will be voting on these as a package. Mr. Hedden, did you still want to speak?
Actually, yes, I did have a comment still. Just on the issue of replacing police or any other town vehicles with hybrids or electrics. While I understand that people are concerned about the environmental impact, we must also consider the environmental impact of buying new vehicles. And if we want to minimize our environmental impact, we might want to consider getting as much use out of existing vehicles as reasonably possible.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else have anything? Okay, if I could just ask Mr. Triller or anyone else who can answer Mr. Zog's question from earlier about how the energy consumption and other environmental impacts gets factored into the decision of the actual vehicle to be purchased.
So from a finance committee perspective, we asked the question, we've had the conversation with the police department to ensure that the vehicles we're buying are responsible, correct vehicles for the uses of the town. In those conversations, I know to date, for a variety of reasons, it made sense to stick with internal combustion engine vehicles up to this point. But ultimately, it comes down to the departments themselves working with the select board and any initiatives or policies we might have. And so I think from our perspective, we ask the questions to make sure we're making a responsible purchase decision. And then we rely on the department heads to make the actual purchase decisions. And then obviously the select board can chime in the community about what priorities they might have around efficiency versus traditional engines. But we don't dictate to the departments what they must buy. We essentially approve an expenditure, and then it's their responsibility to utilize that expenditure in the appropriate way.
Okay, anything else on this article? Yes, over here.
Hi, I'm Ann Davidson of 46 Lowell Street. I realize this might not be the right place to say it. I strongly support our police department, and I also strongly believe that we must invest in electric vehicles, fully electric vehicles. Number one, because they idle, since we don't have an indoor garage space for them in the winter, I understand they idle. And number two, this town needs to be fully committed to electric, and I believe there will probably be incentives in the future from various government entities in order to transform our fleet that way. And I hope that when we get a pickup truck for the DPW, that we invest in a Ford fully electric vehicle. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. If I didn't make it clear, a couple people have come to me. The vehicle we're purchasing is a hybrid. Technology is there, potentially, for a police vehicle that's fully electric. I had a discussion with a group last week. I'm deeply involved in regional policing groups where we talk about this stuff all the time. I would be very surprised if I come 2 years from now, I don't know if it can happen by next year, but 2 years from now, and then I'm not asking you for a fully electric vehicle. I think they're almost there. But folks should know that follow vehicles that, unfortunately, municipal purchases, for lack of a better word, get kicked to the curb when it comes to pursuing things like this because we don't provide the car companies a lot of money. I'm constantly reminded of that when I'm at conferences and we're talking about vehicles. But I think this hybrid vehicle that we're buying is the most fuel-efficient, best solution right now without going way, 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 way over to the part where we're buying an electric vehicle that's not meant to do what we do with our cars. And I don't want people to think that we don't pay attention to this. This is extremely important to me. I understand it's not just a tenor. It wasn't just the person that talked about it before. I get this a lot, and I think it's really important. And I am anxious to pursue this from the police side. I'm sorry I didn't take the time to say that previously, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're ready for a vote. Okay, so we're now voting on this entire group for a total appropriation of $318,000 to be available immediately at the close of town meeting. All those in favor, please hold up your voting card. Anyone opposed, hold up your voting card. Motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. We are on to Article 15, which is municipal facilities, and motion by Mr. Jerry Lehrman. Mr. Lehrman moves that the town vote to transfer from the undesignated fund balance the sum of $500,000 for facilities maintenance and improvement projects at the Town Hall, Police Station, Gleason Library, and Department of Public Works facilities, all of which projects being expected to be completed by June 30th, 2023. Is there a second? Second. The motion has been made and seconded. I recognize Mr. Lehrman.
Mr. Moderator, I'm Jerry Lehrman, 218 Stern Street. This is the fourth in an ongoing series of warrant articles to fund the maintenance issues at various town buildings. The past three articles have mostly funded deferred maintenance, things that we should have been doing all along but hadn't. We've made a substantial dent in those projects, but there's still other ones that are waiting to happen. This particular warrant article will fund items such as, but not limited to, replacing the membrane roof at Town Hall, replacing the RTU, the rooftop unit at Town Hall, which is at the end of its useful lifespan, reconditioning the elevator at Town Hall, which is at the end of its useful lifespan, expanding the salt shed at the DPW. The DPW needs additional capacity to store salt. There's a paving project at DPW to account for the new septic system that was put in, and to replace the air handler at Gleason Library. The sum of all these projects exceeds the $500,000 amount of the warrant article, so our task in the upcoming several years is to allocate those funds prudently between the various projects, identifying and addressing the ones that are most immediately pressing.
Thank you, Mr. Lehrman. We have the recommendation from the Select Board 4-0 to support passage, and from the Finance Committee, unanimous 7-0 also passage of Article 15. Do we have recommendations from any other town boards or committees? Okay, so any debate on this? Mr. White. Feel free to raise the microphone so it's comfortable for you.
Jonathan White, Bedford Road again. Why is the town, Mr. Moderator, paying for a trailer and not bringing the DPW building up to code? It hasn't been to code since 1980 when they moved in.
Thank you. Mr. Lehrman?
The cost of making modifications to the DPW to bring it up to code far exceed the cost of a modular building like a trailer that will provide office space and break room space for the staff at DPW that is safe.
Are you saying, is such a trailer a part of this budget?
No.
No.
The trailer was funded out of last year's budget and is in place at DPW.
And is in place at this time. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Other comments on this article? Anyone? Mr. Zog?
Yes, Bob Zog, 923 North Road. Similar question. How will energy consumption and environmental benefits be considered in these decisions to invest in our buildings, especially in the town hall and the library? Thank you.
Mr. Lerman?
It's a complicated question. We have to look at two things. One is the cost of providing the necessary capability and the additional cost of providing the most energy efficient solution possible. Those are things that we look at very carefully in deciding how to proceed, and the answer isn't always obvious, but we do the best that we can.
Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Hedden?
I wasn't able to find a table showing how this how the money will be broken down between the different items.
This is a change from the way it has been done in the past. Mr. Lerman, perhaps you could explain.
Well, it's been done two different ways. There was a warrant article that explicitly identified line items, and there have been several articles that don't explicitly identify line items. The reason why we'd like to not make it explicit is because the maintenance issues at town changed, and we need the flexibility to address emergency failures that may come up. So we've identified the list of things that we like to do, but if something else pops up that's more crucial than addressing the elevator at Town Hall, for instance, that money might be used to handle that problem.
Thank you. Any other comments on this article? Okay, I think we're ready to proceed to a vote. This is to transfer $500,000 from the undesignated fund balance for facilities maintenance and improvement projects. All in favor, please raise your voting card. Any opposed, please raise your voting cards. Do we have any opposition this time? Okay. Yes, we do have some. Okay, so motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. So now we skip ahead. So we're going from Article 15 to Article 17. Article 17 would establish a new committee, the Town Governance Task Force. Since this article, if adopted, would direct the town moderator to appoint a committee, and since no one seems to be running against me in the election in 2 weeks, it looks like I'll be the one appointed. I'll have the responsibility to do that. And also, since I was involved giving some substantive advice to those developing this warrant article, I think it's appropriate for me to recuse myself from moderating this portion of the meeting. That means that the meeting needs to select an acting moderator. So at this point, I will turn the meeting over to the town clerk, who will run the selection process.
Seeing that moderator Dane Wavis has recused himself, I will facilitate the process to elect an acting town moderator. Do I hear a motion for an acting town moderator to facilitate the discussion and vote on Article 17, establish a new committee, Town Governance Task Force, due to moderator Wayne Davis's conflict of interest as the chair of the proposed committee, with the understanding that once the vote on Article 17 is taken, Wayne Davis will resume the role of the moderator. So do I hear a motion?
I nominate Gretchen Anderegg as acting moderator.
That's not what we're doing right now. Do we have a motion and a second? So I guess Al, you want to make the motion?
I thought that's a good call for. Okay, I nominate Gretchen Anderegg as acting moderator.
Okay, all right.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, now, do I? Okay. So do I have a nomination for the acting town moderator?
Yes, you do.
Okay,
I nominate Gretchen Anderegg as acting moderator.
okay. Do I hear any other nominations? Okay, is there a motion to close the nomination? And there's a second. All those in favor of? Opposed? Okay. I declare that Gretchen Anderegg has been elected to serve as acting town moderator to facilitate the discussion and vote on Article 17. Okay, so is there? All in favor?
Of Gretchen as moderator.
As, I thought they did that, but okay. All in favor of Gretchen as moderator? Okay. Any opposed?
All right, Article 17 is to establish a new committee, the Town Governance Task Force. So I'm going to read the summary. Article 17 concerns the establishment of a new committee to study the form, organization, and practices of town government and make recommendations to improve the efficiency, efficacy, responsiveness, and transparent functioning thereof. On behalf of the Board of Selectmen, I understand Kate Reed has moved the adoption of Article 17 as printed in the motion's handout. Is there a second? Second. Yep. Nope. Yeah, just come up here. We can share. That's okay. All right. This article seeks approval for the town moderator to appoint a town governance task force and directs the task force to report back to next year's annual town meeting. We have not done this since 1995, when the town created the Carlisle 2000 task force, charged with studying and reporting back to town meeting on options for future government structure. That task force's final report was accepted at the 1998 town meeting. The new town governance task force will be charged with studying the form, organization, and practices of Carlisle's government and making recommendations to improve the efficiency, responsiveness, and transparency of our government. It's important to note the task force will be appointed by the town moderator and reports only to town meeting. That means it's not going to report to any other boards or committees. And it can make recommendations of any magnitude, from those involving small or routine practices to larger recommendations that concern the structure and organization of the town. This task force will spend the next year studying town government, and it will be charged with issuing a report no later than 6 weeks prior to the 2022 annual town meeting. It will have the authority to request that the Select Board place articles on the warrant, and the Select Board commits to placing them regardless of whether they support them or not. The task force may also make any other recommendations it deems appropriate, such as recommendations to town boards, committees, or department heads on matters that do not require town meeting approval. The town moderator will appoint the committee members, and we hope this task force will be diverse in background and philosophy, maintain an open mind, and focus above any day-to-day issues. Reporting directly to town meeting through the offices of the moderator is a good way to ensure that the committee maintains maximum independence and freedom from narrow or short-term pressures. I just want to give you an idea about what some of the last task force got done. They had recommended that the Select Board, in those days, the selectmen, go from a board of from 3 to 5, which we now currently have. They also made a bunch of other recommendations, which the town meeting did not approve the first time around. But one of the things that failed the first time was that the town treasurer collector go from an elected to an appointed position. It is now an appointed position. It did go back down the first time it came to town meeting.
The article has been recommended unanimously by the Select Board. FinCom took no position. Are there any other town boards or committees that have a recommendation? Floor is open for debate. In the back?
Good afternoon. Brian Cruz, 71 Rogers Road. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, because in the original motion in the warrant article, or the original warrant article on the warrant, the summary indicated that the committee would be directly placing articles on the warrant. This summary in the motion is now indicating that they would recommend to the Select Board to place articles on the warrant, which is in accordance with statute. But now we're hearing, and it's nowhere in the summary, but we're hearing that the Select Board has committed to placing any article recommended to them on the warrant in advance without ever seeing it. Has a formal vote of the Select Board actually taken to that effect? And what is the legal basis for them to be able to approve in advance warrant articles to go on the warrant before they've even seen them?
Mrs. Reed? Or Town Council?
We were informed that actually that committee would not be able to put things directly on the warrant because all warrant articles are placed on the warrant by the Select Board. I guess I'm the one that circulated the idea that the Select Board, commit to putting warrant articles on, because I think it's important that whatever ideas that are brought up are not seen to be kind of blockaded or predisposed of by a small group of town citizens. And I think that it's very important to place all those ideas in front of the legislative body, which is the town meeting.
Over here.
Hi, Kerry Kissinger, Elizabeth Ridge Road. I'd like to know, are there any limits to what this new committee will be able to recommend? For example, last week, Concord and Acton just voted to regionalize their dispatch function. So they're combining it to reduce costs for their dispatch function. 4 years ago, Boxborough decided to regionalize their grade school with Acton and save 10% of their town budget. Other towns are looking at zoning changes, going from maybe 2% to 2-acre zoning to 1-acre zoning. Are these kinds of recommendations within the scope? Is there anything that's not within the scope? We're small, we don't have economies of scale, we should be thinking outside the box. This may allow us to do that. The town still has the choice, but what's your sense of how much scope this organization will have to make these kinds of changes?
My sense is that they would be able to look at regionalization, for example. Zoning bylaws are a different category. That's not part of governance, so that would be a different. So it is any ideas in or out of the box that have to do with town governance.
Any other comments, questions? Yes. I recognize the man on the right.
I hope some of us do. Wayne Davis, Concord Road. 3 quick points. First, just on general principles, and I say this from my professional background in business and organizational consulting and so forth, any organization that hasn't looked at how it's organized and functioned in 25 years is long overdue for a self-assessment. So I support this on those grounds. Number 2, in terms of the point that Mr. Cruz raised, he's absolutely correct in that this committee, by statute, would have no power to put things directly on the warrant. And notwithstanding Ms. Reed's strong support that the Select Board go ahead and put them on the warrant, however they personally feel about them, I guess I would tell the rest of you that as the moderator and the appointing authority, if the committee comes to me next spring and says, gee, we want to recommend this, but it looks like the Select Board is resisting, then I will simply say, okay, go ahead. You're 7 people, get 3 more signatures, put it on the warrant get it on the warrant as a citizen's petition. So there will always be an out for people to get things for this committee to get its recommendations directly to you for your consideration. Having said that, I fully would anticipate that our current Select Board and also the long Carlisle tradition of the Select Board being willing to put things on the warrant, irrespective when they thought it was important for the town to decide, even if the Select Board itself wasn't supportive. There is a tradition of that in Carlisle, and I would expect that this Select Board likely would follow that. And my final point, just to briefly repeat what I said in my letter to the Mosquito, I am actively looking for people who can bring fresh perspectives to this. While I was very grateful to have the opportunity to recognize those of you who've been coming to town meeting for 40 years or more, I would certainly hope that those who are newcomers to town, relative newcomers, those of you who know relative newcomers, this committee will be helping to figure out how town meetings will be run 5, 10, 15 years out. So those are the people who have the greatest interest in serving on this committee and making sure it's effective. So if you're not interested, but you know someone else who would be good, give them a shove and encourage them to apply.
Thank you. Yes.
Brian Cruz, 71 Rogers Road again. I was just hoping, I'm not sure I got an answer to the question, maybe I missed it, but if I get clarification, has the Select Board actually taken a formal vote already to guarantee to put any article recommended to it by the committee on the warrant? Or is this just something that was mentioned off the cuff today?
They have not taken a vote.
Any other discussion, questions? We ready to vote? All right. So this question requires a majority vote. So this is blue cards once again. So all in favor, please raise your voting cards. And say aye, thank you. And all opposed, please raise your cards. Thank you very much. This motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. Thank you. Mr. Moderator? Your books are blowing away. Thank you for stepping.
Thank you, Gretchen. Okay, we are on to Article 18, which is a motion to amend the Carlisle zoning bylaws to change the term selectmen to select board. This motion is made by Barney Arnold, who moves that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw as follows: by striking the term Board of Selectmen wherever it may appear in said bylaw and inserting in place thereof the term Select Board, and by striking the term Selectmen wherever it may appear in said zoning bylaws and inserting in place thereof the term Select Board. Did we mean to have these two separate repeating paragraphs? Am I reading this correctly? Is it, I'm just checking with town council, so this motion is correct? As printed? Okay? Sometimes I just like to be belt suspenders and Velcro, sure that we're doing the right thing. Okay, so we have the motion. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Does anyone want to speak to this, or are we, does someone want to explain it, or are we sufficient as printed? Sufficient as printed? Okay. This is, since it's a zoning bylaw, I would recognize Madeline Blake to summarize the report of the planning board.
Hi, everyone. Is this working? Hi. Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Madeline Blake, Carlton Road, and I'm a co-chair of the planning board. We held a public hearing and voted to approve this change, this amendment to the Carlisle zoning bylaw by a vote of 5-2. We'd like to have the zoning bylaw be consistent with the general bylaw, which everyone voted to change to the term select board at last town meeting. This change has been well received and we support it.
Thank you. And the select board also voted unanimously 4-0 to support passage of Article 18. Any other boards or committees wish to speak to this? Okay, the floor is open for debate. Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. This is a two-thirds vote. Two-thirds vote, zoning bylaw. All in favor, please signify by raising your voting card. Say aye. Any opposed? Raise your card. Okay, the motion passes by more than two-thirds, and I so declare. We're on to Article 19, which is another bylaw amendment. This is to the general bylaws, the personnel bylaw. Kate Reed moves that the town vote to amend the general bylaws by deleting Article 15 of the general bylaws in its entirety and inserting in place thereof a new Article 15 as printed in the motion handout. Motion has been made. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Ms. Reed?
A large part of the current personnel bylaw was repeated in the personnel procedures and policies. And we thought it was time to do a little housekeeping and clean up all that language and take a lot of the things that should rightfully be in the policies out of the bylaw and just leave them in the policies. So that's basically what this bylaw is about.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. The Select Board voted unanimously 4-0 to support passage of Article 19. I presume FinCom did not take a vote on this. Is that correct? Any other boards or committees? Personnel Committee? Recommendation on this? No? Okay. Any floors open for debate? Yes, please.
Ellen Kriegel from Fisk Street. This seems to be a how we do business kind of change. And given that we've just established a new committee to look at how we govern, and that committee is going to report within the century, why are we making this change right now rather than looking at the whole picture and doing the right change at the right time?
Thank you. Ms. Reed, if you could speak to that.
I would say that's an excellent question. The major reason is because this process actually got started quite a bit before and earlier than the idea of the governance committee, and we were so far along we just decided to put it on the warrant because all the work had already been done.
Thank you. Any other debate on this? I'm sorry, was someone else? Yes, please. Mr. Zelinski.
Bob Zelinski, 382 Acton Street. I agree. This should not.
Come a little closer to the microphone.
Bob Zelinski, 382 Acton Street. I agree. This should not even be moved, because regardless of whether this town meeting votes yes or no, this will be one data point this governance committee is going to have to work around.
Other comments, questions? Okay, we're ready to proceed to a vote. This is a majority vote to amend the general bylaws to amend the personnel bylaw. All in favor, please raise your voting card or say yay, and say yay. Aye. Any opposed? Raise your cards. Motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. Okay, back one more time, but I guess there's no promise of this being the end. Article 20, amend the Carlisle zoning bylaws on adult use marijuana. Moved by Madeline Blake, moves that the town adopt Article 20 as printed in the motion handout. Is there a second? A motion has been made and seconded. I recognize Ms. Blake.
Hello again, everyone. The Planning Board is recommending that we amend our zoning bylaw to prohibit marijuana businesses from locating here. We ask your support to enact this prudent and necessary zoning change. We held a public hearing on this, and we voted 7-0 in favor of recommending this zoning change. We issued a report, much of which I'm going to touch on. There's hard copies available of it at the table. As the moderator just alluded to, some of you are probably saying to yourselves, didn't we decide this at the 2019 town meeting? Why are they bringing this back again? Didn't they hear us? And the answer is yes, we did hear you. We very much heard you. And we've spent about a year working on this topic, working through the issues. And we started from the point that we're going to recommend some way to allow something here because that seems to be what people want. But after working through the issues and spending a lot of time on research and discussion, we came to the conclusion that there's no feasible location for these businesses in Carlisle. We view ourselves as having a responsibility to recommend prudent zoning that makes sense and fits and benefits the town, and we could not find a way to recommend marijuana establishments that met this test. Now, there's actually 30 different decisions embedded in this, and to your great relief, I will not go into all 30 of them. There are 10 different types of marijuana businesses, and we have 3 different zones in town. There were 2 types of businesses that the planning board viewed as the most likely candidates. One would be to allow a retail marijuana store in our existing business zones. And the other possibility would be to allow a cultivator or grower in our existing residential areas. We viewed these types of businesses as being the most similar to the types of uses that are already allowed in those zones, and thus we gave them the greatest amount of consideration. So first, retail stores. Alone among the 10 types of businesses, this type of business would theoretically provide a benefit for the town. State law provides that we can enact a local 3% excise tax on sales from a retail marijuana store. Despite this theoretical benefit, we don't recommend zoning to allow these in town. The primary reason is that we just don't have feasible locations for them. People might be familiar with business districts in other towns, maybe larger towns, where they're a contiguous area, they're regular, there's some area to it. We don't have that. Our business zones are actually 5 small, distinct areas in the town center and 3 more along Bedford Road. These are small, they're not contiguous. In most instances, they're only a portion of a property, with the rest of the property being zoned residential. They are all filled with existing businesses. Some of the businesses are of very long-standing duration. In particular, we've had a general store in the center of Carlisle since well back into the 1800s. They all have limited parking, and there is no room for expansion without moving on to residential adjacent areas. In the town center, the business zones are in relatively close proximity, some of them within 500 feet of the Carlisle Public School, and of other places that children congregate, such as the library and Fern's Country Store. For these reasons, we don't view these sites as feasible locations to have their use expanded in this fashion. Impacts could include increased traffic and need for parking enforcement, changes to the physical appearance of the buildings due to the cannabis control regulations, and actual or perceived child safety issues due to children being in the proximity of them. And I just want to give just a minute on the potential to earn the revenue. I know people, especially when marijuana first became legalized, heard stories about how much money some of these stores were earning. They wouldn't be comparable stores for us to look to. When some of the stores started, they were the only ones, or only 10 in the state, and we were the only state on the East Coast that had legalized marijuana. We're on a trajectory now where we could get saturated with marijuana stores. They've been widely adopted. There's approximately 90 approved already and 70 more in the pipeline. So to think of this as some kind of expansive market where there's unlimited revenues, I think is not going to be consistent with how it will develop as it becomes a mature market. I want to move on briefly to the other type of use we considered, which is allowing cultivators or growers in residential areas. Just to be clear, we would not as a town get any type of benefit from allowing this establishment. Currently, most marijuana cultivation in Massachusetts is done indoors in warehouse type of buildings. It's not a thing that naturally grows here, so it needs greenhouse type of conditions. These structures are large. They have ventilation, generators, they generate odors, they use a lot of water. They would cause impacts in our residential neighborhoods. So we think that's a reason for not treating them the way that we have traditionally treated agriculture, which is a by right use in residential areas. And I just want to wrap up by addressing what I think might be another question that people have, which is if this is so hard and so unlikely that these businesses can't feasibly locate here, why are we bothering? Why do we even need to do anything? Can't we just continue along as we are? And the answer is that although it's unlikely, it's not impossible. And there's absolutely no reason that we should continue along with any sort of risk at all. There's probably a number of people here that have term life insurance policies. Probably none of you will die within the term, I sincerely hope, but it's a safety precaution. Employers, organizations have policies and procedures, some of which cover things that might not arise. This is something that we as a prudent community should enact. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have the recommendation of the planning board on this. We also have the select board voted unanimously 4-0 to support passage of Article 20. No vote from FinCom on this. Any other boards or committees have a recommendation? Okay, the floor is open for debate. Anyone? Over in the corner here. Please just get comfortably in front of the microphone.
Hi, I'm Laura Snowden from Bellows Hill Road. So I assume you're including dispensaries in this group of selling marijuana products. I went to a dispensary a few weeks ago. Straight-laced daughter said, get something for pain. It's the most sterile. You need an ID to get in. People like me are going in, not these crazy drug addicts who are buying like weed. I mean, I think maybe a lot of us are of a generation, we remember what it was like back in the 60s and 70s, and maybe it was a little less proper, but I'm just kind of feel like we're saying before anything's even happened, we're saying we want to make sure this never happens. And I actually think a liquor store would be worse than a pot dispensary where you're getting medicinal controlled substances. Anyway.
Thank you. Over here.
Dave Erickson, 237 Fisk Street. I have to agree with the previous speaker. It seems to me that this is just an attempt to outlaw marijuana in Carlisle. I don't really care that much one way or the other for myself, but if we're going to outlaw marijuana, why don't we get rid of alcohol and tobacco as well? That's not on the warrant. I don't see any reason why we should make an exception for marijuana. I don't see why we should prohibit cultivating marijuana. What if somebody wants to put up a greenhouse to grow tomatoes? I mean, it's going to create odors and require ventilation and water as well. I think is ridiculous to tell a would-be farmer in Carlisle what it is they can grow and what it is they can't grow. I strongly oppose this. I don't think we should be making special laws to basically outlaw marijuana. The people of the state voted that they thought marijuana should be legal. So why are we trying to delegalize it?
Thank you. Mr. Hedden?
I see in the list of reasons for this proposal, one mentioned is the proximity to the Carlisle Public School. I really don't see how this would be a problem, seeing as we already allow the sale of alcohol in the center of town close to the school, and that does not seem to cause problems for the students. Thank you.
Thank you. The blue shirt over here, and then Mr. Cruz, you'll be next.
Sam Verge, Indian Hill. I feel like I'm in a time machine because I stood up here 2 years ago saying the same thing. I think that the public perception has really shifted with cannabis. It's not the devil's lettuce. It's not something that is going to be grown in warehouses everywhere with fumes. No one's going to come here to open up a cannabis dispensary or to grow it. Trust me, I'm in retail. I would never build a business here. I love this town, but this is not a retail-friendly town. And you admitted, hey, no one's going to do it, so let's ban it. When I think of prohibition or banning things, I think of ban gay marriage. I think of banning books. I think of prohibition from the 20s. I mean, what are we doing here? Like, I use it for medicine. I'm part of the community. So we're going to ban it, so then I can't get it delivered, and if I can't drive to get it, how am I going to get it? There are a lot of people, some people I know in this town, that use this for an actual medicine. This isn't rolling doobies and like getting stoned before going to see Star Wars. You know, this is a real thing that many people need in their lives. I don't drink alcohol, but I'm not going to say go ban booze. Also, who in their right mind would ever open a dispensary down the street in the business district? You can't do it. There's a school right here. I think a lot of this is ignorance and fear. And I think that when people don't truly understand something, they want to ban it, they want to prohibit it, whatever it is. You know, and I can't believe we're talking about this. It's almost 2022. So, thanks.
Thank you. Town council has something to clarify on the medical dispensary side of this. So, Mr. Harrington?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Harrington, Town Council. I just wanted to clarify, this does not prohibit the sale of medical marijuana in town. This prohibits the sale of recreational marijuana in town. So that's one important distinction. I also heard a question about delivery. This would, in fact, prohibit delivery of marijuana in town, but I can tell you that the CCC, the Cannabis Control Commission, is working through a process now where the town could then elect to allow the delivery of marijuana in town at a future town meeting. So that's becoming a separate issue, but I did want to clarify that this does not prohibit the sale of medical marijuana in town.
Thank you. Mr. Cruz?
Thank you. Brian Cruz, 71 Rogers Road. I just want to point out a couple of things that I think are accurate, and Town Council, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is already a requirement, state regulation-wise, for being certain proximity from a school. So that's in effect regardless of what we do. Additionally, this still has to go to the voters. So, I mean, if you're asking, the voters made a decision a few years ago, well, the voters are going to have to decide on this again as well. This is a motion to put it before the voters. The one thing I would say just personally is that when you're outside of a major urban area, these types of businesses typically are seen in manufacturing and industrial districts. You don't often see towns zoning them in business districts for the reason of just the traffic and the odor they create. So that's sort of where towns are leaning in terms of how they go about zoning this anyway. So given the fact that we don't have those zoning districts at all, most towns don't allow them in their general retail districts unless they're a larger metropolitan area where, it's a crowded area as it is. So for small towns that have little business areas, that's not where these are being located in those towns anyway.
Thank you. And Mr. Cruz, actually, just to clarify your comment about the school, was your point that the state statute says no retail within 500
There's
feet
a
of a
state
school?
regulation that says that, yes.
So, and our retail district, center of town Ferns, is within 500 feet?
I don't know that, but I'm just, so if someone knows that.
Yeah, Miss Blake, if you could, just want to get that clear for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. There's a few things I'd like to respond to, if that's okay, but I'll take that one first. The state law has a suggested buffer zone of 500 feet, and it's measured from the edge of the property, so that would pick up 2 of the 5 in our town center. It wouldn't reach all the way to Ferns. We can vary that buffer zone if we want. We could decide not to have any. We could decide to have a 1,000-foot buffer zone. The way our town is set up, it doesn't make sense to approach this in terms of what type of buffer zone should we have, because there's the one spot in the one school. We should just decide whether we want it or not, and then adjust the buffer zone accordingly. I wanted to quickly respond to a couple of the comments about this is like prohibition and we should have moved on from this. And I probably didn't do a good enough job of emphasizing this, but this is a zoning decision. This decision should be made based on whether we have the appropriate places to put these businesses. They've been widely accepted across the state. People are going to be able to go and buy this and to grow it. There's a lot of things that we can't fit in this town as much as we'd like to. And that's just the way it is. And as far as the liquor versus marijuana comparison, one of the differences is the different legal and regulatory climate that they're subjected to. There's a very different set of regulations around marijuana right now, starting with being illegal at the federal level and a whole separate set of regulations at the state level that don't allow them to the marijuana business to be carried out the same way that the liquor business is carried out. It couldn't coexist with Ferns the same way that a liquor business does.
Thank you. Any other comments? Anything from this side? Yes.
Hi, Jonathan DeCock, 130 Oak Knoll Road. I am also responsible, at least partially, for the sunshade that you have above you today. Thank you. So I bring that up because it was 2 years ago that I stood before you all and requested a zoning amendment so that we could actually build this. And it was also 2 years ago where we declared our shared community value as a right to farm community. And I think that's very important because those values really speak to what we as a community want to have. And as a result, I personally am very concerned about the very beginning of this bylaw where it says to prohibit all cultivation, right? Now, the planning board would have you believe that it is only done as an industrial cultivation manner. And I would agree that industrial cultivation in general is a problem, right? We've all heard the horror stories of how they farm chickens and how we get our eggs. That's not the only way to farm chickens. In the same way, having an industrial system is not the only way to create marijuana. And I will use an example from February 26th. The Boston Globe ran an excellent article on agricultural growing of marijuana in Massachusetts. Feel free to use your phones to look up the article now. That article described the trials and tribulations that agricultural growers of marijuana have. They have a number of difficulties, including we have a very short growing season here in Massachusetts. I know it's ridiculously hot and global warming is coming, but we still have a relatively short season, so they have to grow certain types of marijuana that actually mature soon enough. They also have difficulties with too much mold and keeping it pure enough, right? Now, all these difficulties add up, right? However, much like my chicken eggs, which I sell for slightly more than you get at the grocery store, because they are free range and I have nice, happy chickens, whereas they're not industrial farmed. So marijuana farmed agriculturally is actually something that can be profitable. And with our heavy real estate, right, you really need to have a profitable crop. And I would say to the planning board there are reasonable ways that we could restrict marijuana cultivation such that it was not done in a manner that was inappropriate to our town. And a prime example is what is already on our books for a pig farm. It's not a free-for-all that we're a right-to-farm community. We still have rules. One rule is you cannot have roosters crowing in the middle of the night. Another rule is if you want to have a pig farm, you actually have to go before the planning board and get a special permit, right? I think it would be perfectly reasonable for us to set up a bylaw that says if you would like to cultivate marijuana, you have to go before the planning board and get a special permit. That way, we would be true to our shared community values, that we like local agriculture, but we would still prohibit any of the things that come along with marijuana that we don't want to have.
Mr. DeCuck, you're at 3 minutes.
I'm done.
Thank you. Mr. Kablotsky?
Josh Kablotsky, 99 Nichols Lane. I agree with all of the previous presenters, including the planning board. I agree that economically, it will not advantage the town to have cannabis in the town. Longer term, growers are going to move out of Massachusetts once they can federally move cannabis across state line. It's simply cheaper to grow in California, so for large-scale cultivation. I agree also that locally, within Massachusetts, there's a saturation of dispensaries, and so you're probably not going to see dispensaries popping up. I also agree that it's not a dangerous thing to have in town. We have many things that are more dangerous in town. There already are suggestions in other ways to keep it further away from the school. I agree that there are established businesses in places that one might put cannabis businesses. That doesn't mean that in 25 or 50 years, those businesses will still be operating and still be doing the same business. The bylaw that we pass lasts until it's changed, however. And I see no need to apply restrictions to what is done in Carlisle that are not in the interest of the people in Carlisle. If we believe that there's not going to be a business that we don't want, we don't have to worry about stopping it. If we say it's okay, that's different from actually causing it to be there. In other words, we're not voting to put a business there. We're voting to allow the idea, we're voting to prohibit the idea of it. And I'm reluctant to restrict people's activities and behaviors unnecessarily. And this seems like an unnecessary restriction to me.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Friedman?
David Friedman, Hutchins Road. I'd like to just sort of respond to the suggestion that the planning board was acting out of fear. I'm not on the planning board anymore, but I think it's important. I think the example that a previous speaker brought up about this solar canopy actually illustrates how one could proceed if this bylaw did pass, which is if someone came forward with a proposal for a marijuana facility in town, then a bylaw could be crafted directly related to what is being proposed, which is exactly what was done here with this solar canopy. Having a bylaw that would not have allowed this canopy didn't keep it from happening, and the townspeople were served by a specific proposal that made us understand exactly what it is that was allowed, and that would still be possible with this bylaw. The concern from the planning board's perspective, I don't want to speak for them, but I, having been on the planning board for years, I was reached out to by the current co-chairs of the board to craft a bylaw that allows it and creates a special permit process, requires developing a sense of where it's possible for this to happen such that you can put reasonable protections for citizens and abutters on it. And if you can't come up with what that idea is in advance, it's very difficult to do, hence the example of this solar canopy.
Thank you. Anyone else in back here? Okay, you'll be next. Here first, please.
Yeah, Chris Peterson, 120 Evergreen Lane. I had a clarification request. It sounded like delivery of medicinal marijuana is going to become illegal. Is that, did I hear that correctly?
Just in November this past year, the Cannabis Control Commission authorized and allowed delivery for the first time. And there's 3 ways that delivery can take place into a town. 2 of them are derivative of zoning, and 1 is not. If you allow a retailer in your town, or if you allow the delivery depot or headquarters of the delivery, then delivery will be allowed in your town. If you don't allow those 2 things, your town can still, as town council was explaining, go through a process to affirmatively decide, yes, let's have delivery. To my mind, this is a good discussion for us to have, freed from the zoning, which is tied to the locations. If we enact this bylaw, we'll take off the table the ways for delivery to be allowed that are derivative of zoning, and we'll be able to have the broader discussion, should we allow delivery in a flexible manner. And we can even collect the 3% retail excise tax on that if we do determine to allow delivery. So that decision we can still make.
Let me just, if you could stay there, let me see if I can, because I don't think I completely understood that, and maybe Mr. Harrington can help if we need to. So what you're saying is that at this point, under the state regulations, the way you get delivery in a town is if the town has a business that is located there that is a delivery business.
That's 1.
That's 1. What about if the delivery business is in another town? Can they deliver into Carlisle? I think that's the
delivery
question.
business that's located in another town, there's 3 ways they can be allowed to deliver here. 1 is if we also have our own delivery business that's located here. 2 is if we have zoning that allows for a store. And the 3rd way is, even if we have zoning that doesn't allow for any of these businesses, we can just come together and decide, yes, we want delivery. So we would, at town meeting, we would vote and we would say, yes, we want delivery. From other towns, delivery places located outside of town, they can deliver here.
Okay, thank you. Mr. DeCock, and then if you want to speak again.
Jonathan DeCock, 130 Oak Knoll Road again. I just want to clarify how this got built. This was not done by a company coming to the town and saying, we would like to build something here. This was done by a very extensive effort by the Energy Task Force, working with the school committee, the select board, the planning board, and many other things for about 3 years to come up with the concept so that we could put out a request for proposals, wherein we got 3 proposals back. A committee made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, who ultimately selected the company which did in fact build this. So it was not a company coming here, it was done by town volunteers to suggest this.
Okay, Mr. Haddon hasn't spoken on this one yet, so I'll recognize him first, and then back to you, Mr. Erickson.
Sorry, just one more point of clarification on the delivery. I understand that there is a means to a potential means to deliver in the town without allowing a business here, but that has not been approved yet, and until it is approved, it would not be possible. Is that correct?
Right now, our zoning allows marijuana establishments to locate here because we have not yet enacted a prohibition. So right now, delivery is allowed in Carlisle. If we enact this bylaw change today and the zoning establishments are no longer allowed here, there will be a period of time where delivery is not allowed until such time as the select board leads a discussion to determine whether we should allow it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Erickson?
So that was basically my question. So if we pass this, it's very clear there will be no delivery for at least a year. There's no guarantee there will be delivery after a year. I mean, it will be at least until the next town meeting before anybody would be able to take delivery of medicinal marijuana. I believe that's what you just said. Oh, you can take delivery of, so you don't know about medicinal. Okay, so she said it's recreational that she's talking about. She does not know about medicinal marijuana, so it's not entirely clear, but it's very likely you would not be able to accept delivery of medicinal marijuana if this bylaw is approved.
Mr. Harrington, is that something you were able to address? So the question is on delivery of medicinal marijuana into Carlisle, assuming the passage of this bylaw. You can use this microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Harrington. I believe that this would not impact the delivery of medical marijuana in town.
Thank you. Over here.
Mark Levitan, 105 Wolf Rock Road. Just a question, what's the process to approve retail delivery? Is it a town meeting or is it a select board vote? I may have a follow-up.
I believe the process is still being worked out by the Cannabis Control Commission. Either the legislation or the regulation wasn't crystal clear. When I first read it, I thought the select board would decide, but I think there's been statements by the Cannabis Control Commission subsequently that it would be a town meeting decision. And I think, you know, they just made these regulations in November, so that's one of the things they're still working out is exactly how we would go about approving it.
Given that uncertainty, it seems to me that since it's really incredibly difficult for any of these businesses to locate here, it seems a little bit premature to decline to vote in favor of this until we understand all of the related elements.
Thank you. In front here.
Claudio Rebbi, 52 Indian Hill Road. Since the major concern seems to be delivery of recreational marijuana, I would propose an amendment to the article which adds 511(3), delivery of recreational marijuana will be allowed to the town of Carlisle. So this is a proposed amendment. And the second.
Thank you. I think my rule is that it needs to be very simple to be able to take it not in writing. I think that is actually simple enough. Is there a second to that? Second. Now, just let me do a quick consult with town council. I'll be back with you in a moment. Feel free to take a stretch break or grab some water if you need it. Okay, if I could ask you to move back to your seats. Okay, so did I ask for a second on that, Peggy? We got a motion, and we do have a second on that, I presume? Okay, and let me just first begin just checking with the clerk. Do you have the language on that sufficiently? Could I ask the proponent, I'm sorry, was it Mr. Ribio? Yeah, if you could write it down and give it to the clerk, I think we have the intent sufficiently at this point so that we can move forward. So the proposed amendment would be to add a section 511(3), and we'll get the exact wording in a moment, but basically would be to add that we would be allowing the delivery of recreational marijuana into Carlisle. Did you want to speak further on that? Well, he's writing, so we'll open the floor for debate, and if you'd like to speak further, I will give you the opportunity. Over here.
Hi, Abby Zimmerman, 168 Sunset Road. I feel like you're bundling here and you're putting a lot of things in and asking people to decide, and you've just teased out the delivery and personally, I think the marijuana cultivator and, product manufacturer should be separate. The farming piece is completely different from retail, and I make a motion to pull anything related to farming out.
Well, the motion on the floor at the moment is simply the amendment.
Okay, I'm
So
not.
the rest is on hold for the moment.
So hold that thought that I just shared.
hold
and we can
that
talk
thought.
about it after this
Yes.
amendment.
Yes. If you have an amendment to the amendment, we can deal with that. But I sure hope you don't. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Over here on the right, please.
Carrie Patel, Tophet Road. I just have a question about this amendment and about what's already in here, 511.2. The prohibition statement says all types of marijuana establishments, including marijuana establishments co-located with medical marijuana treatment centers, shall be prohibited from Carlisle. Would that overrule that? Because then right underneath it, if you add this amendment, it's going to say, but we can have delivery. At least, I mean, I could be wrong, but most places I've seen, they do recreational and medical together. And this right here is banning any recreational, even if it is with medical. So I'm just wondering if that is a conflict of interest on that.
I recognize Ms. Blake.
Medical dispensaries are allowed in Carlisle now, and this would not change that. This would prohibit recreational facilities from locating here, and they couldn't get around the prohibition by co-locating with a medical facility. So they wouldn't be allowed under this proposal, whether they're separate or whether they're combined with a medical facility. The prohibition on establishments is separate from delivery, because with delivery, the establishment is somewhere else in another town, and the vehicles are coming into town to deliver. So that's why it's different than zoning. We don't have to find a place for it to be.
So I realize this is all mind-bending, so just to be clear, I actually didn't intend it that way. We have a separate bylaw addressing medical, okay? So that's why medical is not on the table here today. Establishment refers to a business that would be located in Carlisle, paying property tax here or paying rent to a landlord that pays property tax. Delivery, separate from an establishment, would refer to a business located outside of Carlisle delivering into Carlisle. And the amendment, which is what we're talking about at the moment, is simply addressing that last aspect, and it would allow for delivery from outside into Carlisle of recreational marijuana. Okay? Anyone think I got any of that wrong? Just want to make sure. Medicinal is a separate issue. I would like to ask town council just to comment on since he had mentioned earlier that the regulations around delivery are in process with the Cannabis Control Commission. So I'd like to ask him to amplify how that interacts with this proposed amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Again, Tom Harrington, Town Council. So what's exciting about this, from my perspective, is that I think we would be the first town in the Commonwealth to enact such a bylaw if this proposed amendment were enacted. That also frightens me because I don't know what the Attorney General is going to think about this particular amendment. And I don't know what the Cannabis Control Commission is going to think about this amendment. So you're going to get the rock-solid advice from me that I am okay with the amendment as proposed, but I don't know what's going to happen to it once it goes to the state. I don't know if the Attorney General will strike it or allow it, and I don't know what the Cannabis Control Commission will do. What I can tell you is that the idea of delivery it's in its infancy in the state. And the Cannabis Control Commission does not yet fully have their arms around what it means, which means it's difficult for us to adopt a bylaw or amend a bylaw to address something that the state hasn't completed addressing yet. So, long way of saying, if this amendment passes and this goes through, we will do our best to defend it. I suspect if the will of town meeting is that we do allow delivery in town, we will also be back to you either at the fall town meeting or at a spring town meeting to make another change that is advised by that the Cannabis Control Commission instructs us to make. Because I don't think what they will do is have us amend our bylaw this way. I think it'll likely be a different change, and we'll come back to you with that.
Thank you. So just a little bit of context here. Everything, you're not totally sovereign here, despite anything I may have misled you on in the past. Every vote that is taken here is reviewed by the Attorney General's office and allowed or disallowed. Carlisle has a pretty good record. You may recall that Concord has occasionally had a citizen's petition here or there that the Attorney General's office struck down. So it happens sometime, but it's perfectly within your prerogative to decide that you can either say, well, if it's legally uncertain, I don't want to vote for it, or you can say, I don't care whether it's legally certain or whether somebody thinks it's illegal. This is what I want, and I want to vote for it. So that is the meeting's prerogative to decide as it will. So Town Council is simply saying at this moment it's legally uncertain. Mr. Kablotsky?
Josh Kablotsky, Nichols Lane. A question both of clarification, seeking clarification, and that also raises something to think about. If this amendment passes, we as a town will say businesses in other towns can deliver recreational cannabis to our residents. We have already said that businesses can establish themselves in town for medicinal cannabis. Would those medicinal cannabis establishments be allowed to deliver recreational cannabis to residents of town?
Town Council is saying no. Ms. Zimmerman?
I'm just waiting for this
okay.
amendment to pass.
Okay, any other discussion on this amendment? Okay, do we have the written version of this now? We're now voting on an amendment to add to the motion under this article a new paragraph 5.11.3. The delivery of recreational marijuana will be allowed in Carlisle. That's simple, okay? Although, bear with me, this is a majority vote. When we get to the zoning, when we get to the bylaw itself, it will require 2/3, but to amend is simply majority. All those in favor of the amendment to the motion, please signal by raising your voting card. Any opposed? Well, that's close. I think we need our tellers. Okay, so all those in favor, please raise your voting cards and keep them held up. This is a majority vote. Are we all good on the count? Okay, wait you can drop your cards now. And in a moment, we'll ask for the no votes. Okay, could we have the no votes now? The vote was 77 in favor and 47 opposed. Requires a majority vote, and it carries, I so declare. Okay. Ms. Zimmerman.
Thank you, Wayne. Abby Zimmerman, Sunset Road. As I said earlier, I just feel like there's a lumping of a number of different decisions into this article, and I would personally like to pull out the farming and also, I guess, so a marijuana product manufacturer. If I started a chocolate business and was, certified by the Department of Public Health and all that, I couldn't do that. Or if I had a hemp solve, something like that, that would be not allowed with this article. Those are
okay, so you have a choice here. You can
yeah. I mean, so
three things. You can either make an argument, you can ask a question, or you can propose an amendment.
I propose an amendment that you remove growing and product manufacturing from Article 20. So a marijuana cultivator and a marijuana product manufacturer, because this is a small community. I don't see why you would penalize people who have an interest in horticulture or health from retail. I get retail. I don't want a pot shop in the middle of town, but I think that it's being a little bit short-sighted to put everything into one article.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the proposed bylaw by removing from the first line in 511.1 the words marijuana cultivator, and from the second line in 511.1 marijuana product manufacturer. Is there a second? Okay, we've had motion and a second, and I think we've heard the argument for it. Is there any further discussion on the proposed amendment? Okay, let's go to a vote. I'm sorry, Mr. DeCock? Approach the microphone first.
Was it simple enough for you to be able to define the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, because I just had a note on it that if we go and remove that, it still says a marijuana establishment, and then it says all types of marijuana establishments in 511.2. And I was wondering if it would make more sense for us to rephrase that to say retail marijuana establishment at the top and a prohibition on all types of retail marijuana establishments. I do have it written down.
Give me 1 second. Quick consult.
I accept that friendly amendment.
Based on advice of counsel, I rescind my proposal.
So I guess you're all seeing why the importance of engaging with the planning board as early as possible on zoning bylaws, because trying to draft amendments on the floor of town meeting while town meeting's prerogative, it can get very messy. So we are ready, though, to proceed to a vote and this would amend the proposal on 511-1 by striking the terms marijuana cultivator and marijuana product manufacturer. All those in favor of the amendment to remove those from the proposed bylaw, please raise your voting card. Okay, all opposed? I can't tell this one without a count either. The task force may have to look at electronic voting. Okay, if I could get our tellers again. Okay, in favor? This is the amendment to strike the terms from the proposed zoning bylaw. I hope you all are staying well hydrated, and certainly invite you at the close of this vote, if you need water, to make sure you get some. Okay, and could we have those in opposition? So this would leave the wording as is, leave the bylaw as proposed. Okay, so this vote is reported as 64 in favor and 44 opposed. The amendment passes, and I so declare. Are we now ready to move to a vote on the bylaw as a whole? Okay, so let me I'm sorry? Okay, Ms. Pierce?
Nancy Pierce, 1152 Westford Street. I'm sorry I would have asked this question earlier. I was kind of surprised by the amendment. We live right next to a large farm. If this passes as amended, what protection will we have if the owner of that farm decides that he wants to cultivate marijuana? Will there be any restrictions on noise or smells or traffic or hours?
Ms. Blake, could you address that, please?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. They would have to negotiate a community impact agreement, which would be one way to try to put some protections around it. I think if this bylaw passes as amended, so that you're expressing your will that growers will not be prohibited, it would make sense to examine that over the next year, and if there's any additional protections that need to be built into it, we come back with that. Right now, you wouldn't be able to stop it, and to say it can't be there, there may be some limited tools to mitigate the impacts with the community impact agreement.
Sure.
What would be the town body that would negotiate whatever terms could be negotiated to protect abutters?
It would be the select board's responsibility to negotiate a community impact agreement.
Okay, are we ready to proceed to a vote? Okay, so here's what we're voting on. So start with the text as printed. You can eliminate the words marijuana cultivator from the first line of 511(1), and the words marijuana product manufacturer from the second line of 511(1). And then there's a third section, 511(3) added, that says the delivery of recreational marijuana will be allowed in Carlisle. So that is what we're voting on, and this is on the bylaw as a whole. It requires 2/3 for passage. All those in favor, please raise your voting card. All those opposed? Motion carries by 2/3, and I so declare. Has the count been questioned? Okay, we need a total of 7 people if they're to request a recount. Are there 7? Okay, I think we're there. Okay, so let's go to a counted vote. This is 2/3. So when I ask for you to raise your cards, raise them immediately. It's not something, not something for you to dawdle about, because our tellers are only looking once. So all those in favor of this amendment, raise your card now. I'm sorry, not the amendment, the zoning bylaw. It's actually an amendment to the zoning bylaw, but we'll leave that aside. So the main motion, we'll call it that, is in favor of the main motion. Main motion as amended by the two amendments. Okay. All those opposed to this motion as amended? Too bad we don't have an ice cream delivery service. There's no law against it that I'm aware of, but both Great Brook and Kimball's have been very creative in what they've infused in their ice cream recipes over the years. Not that creative, though. Okay, you were right. I was wrong. The vote was 70 in favor, 62 opposed. That fails to achieve 2/3. So we do not have a recreational marijuana bylaw. On to Article 21. The motion fails to carry, and I so declare. Article 21 would amend the Carlisle general bylaws to create the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Kate Reed moves in connection with the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust Fund established pursuant to Article 25 of the 2006 Annual Town Meeting, the town vote to amend the general bylaws by adopting a new Section 3.27 Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust to read as printed in the motion handout. Is there a second? Was there a second? Yes, okay. Motion has been made and seconded. Ms. Reed, if you could speak to Article 21.
In 2006, town meeting authorized the creation of the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust. It failed, however, to follow that up with a bylaw. So we are basically doing some housekeeping and now creating the bylaw under which the trust will be operating.
Your brevity is appreciated. So on this one, we have the recommendation of the Select Board 4-0 in favor of passage. Are there any other town boards or committees that wish to report a vote on this? Okay, the floor is open for debate. I recognize Mr. Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Brian Cruz, 71 Rogers Road. I am moving to amend this article, or this motion rather, pursuant to the handout that I provided everyone. I picked up a copy. Mr. Moderator, I don't know if you want me to read the entire motion, or can I just move it pursuant to the handout?
You can move it pursuant to the handout.
Would you like me to just move it and discuss at the same time, or just move it first?
Move it, we'll ask for a second, and then I'll allow you to speak to it.
I move to amend Article 21 of the warrant by deleting from the conclusion of proposed subsection 3.27.4 of the general bylaws the following phrase as provided in the motion handout, and further by adding a new subsection 3.27.6 to the proposed section 3.7 of the general bylaws as shown in my handout.
Thank you. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Cruz?
Thank you. So this, although it's fairly long, it accomplishes one fairly basic purpose, which is to ensure that, subject to certain limited exceptions, the Board of Trustees cannot engage in any action relative to real property, whether it's purchase, sale, lease, abandonment, mortgaging it, using it as collateral for debt in any kind, without town meeting approval. The certain exceptions are they can engage in restricting the property or obtaining restrictions on property in accordance with, statutory allowances for affordable housing restrictions. They can also grant easements for utility connections, and then they can lease individual units in multi-unit developments. But other than that, they need town meeting approval to do anything relating to real property. And the reason why I thought this was necessary is because this would allow a town municipal body that is not subject to voters, that is appointed, to have more discretionary authority over real property acquisition and disposal than the select board does. If the select board wants to buy property or sell property or lease property, they need to come to town meeting for approval. So I don't see why the Board of Trustees of the Housing Trust should have more authority in that regard than the select board. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the floor is now open for debate on the amendment only, not on the main motion. Mr. Levitan.
Mark Levitan, Wolf Rock Road. This shouldn't be debatable. We authorized the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in 2006, and it's been operating under the state enabling it legislation ever since. And it's actually done some good things in its first 10 years of existence. So to start to say that we need to put some new restrictions on this misses the point of having the Affordable Housing Trust. The point of the Affordable Housing Trust, as many other towns do, is to accumulate funds for purposes of creating affordable housing as defined by state law. Those decisions, the major ones for projects that we have, and I don't like the word projects, for developments that we have at Benfield and at Bedford Road, anything like that always comes to town meetings, always goes to the permitting boards, and this has really very little to do with that. It has to do with the ability, and many towns do this, they buy a fixer-upper and they sell it for a profit, they put the money in a fund, and they get to, be able to put more seed money into developments that are needed. This isn't a commentary on what kind of developments. This is about whether or not we decide that we should do more about affordable housing in Carlisle. And there's a lot of discussion these days all throughout our country and the world about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We go to great pains to teach about it and to make sure our children are living it as much as we can in this very white town. And this is the kind of stuff we need to be doing with a group that has a purpose, a very well-defined mission, and has no ability to spend outside the bounds of town meeting. It's to develop funding. And to be able to agree with Habitat for Humanity, say, on a fixer-upper or to build something new, a 1 or 2 family house as allowed by our zoning. So there's no argument here. You have to vote in favor of this, and appreciate it.
Actually, Mr. Levitan, did you mean we're only on the amendment. I thought I heard
I'm
you
against the
speaking
amendment.
against the amendment.
I'm against the amendment. Thank you.
All right. Very good. I'm willing to cut everyone a little slack. I think our heads are all a little fuzzy with the heat. Ms. Reed.
Kate Reed, 51 Carlton Road. I'm a member of the Select Board and the Chair of the Housing Trust. I am, however, speaking now as a private citizen, as neither the Board nor the Trust had time to consider this amendment. Carlisle has lost some opportunities to purchase land for municipal purposes because it could not move swiftly enough. Town meeting rightfully needs a plan for property before it authorizes purchases. Plans take time. And often there is no time, so the town has passed up some buildable properties due to lack of a plan. Plans, good plans, require that they're developed around a specific piece of land. In general, you just can't take a plan off the shelf and have it work. The Housing Trust is funded with Community Preservation Act funds, which must be approved by the local legislative body, in fact, I hope we will be doing later on, and which in our case is town meeting. The legislative body in Carlisle is town meeting. This can be especially challenging since town meetings typically convene only once or twice a year. Recognizing this problem, Mass General Law, Chapter 44B, Section 55C, allows the town to establish a local municipal affordable housing trust, which can hold and expend funds, and Carlisle's trust was established in keeping with that statute. Community preservation funds are derived from a surcharge on our property tax, which are partially matched by the state. It's important to note that these funds may be transferred to the local housing trust only by approval by town meeting. Plus, the Select Board and Community Preservation Committee members are represented on the Housing Trust Board to create overlap and integrated communications between these municipal entities. In summary, the state created housing trusts to give them time and flexibility to create well-considered plans to present to a town meeting. This amendment would take that away and cripple the housing trust.
Thank you. Ms. Andre? Mr. Friedman, did you want to be recognized? Okay.
Hi, Vanessa Maroney, Bedford Road. I'd like to speak about opposing this amendment strongly.
Could you lift the microphone a little bit?
So I oppose this amendment. I'm speaking as the former chair of the Affordable Housing Trust and also having been the chair of the last Housing Production Plan Committee. This is just another means to, in my opinion, hamstring any affordable housing efforts that this town can make. We've already disbanded our housing authority. I strongly oppose this amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman?
David Friedman, Hutchins Road. I reluctantly support the proposed amendment to the bylaw, and here's why. While the bylaw may essentially codify what is already in the Declaration of Trust, there's currently no general agreement in the town as to what we as a community want to see with regard to affordable housing. So at the present time, I'm uncomfortable with giving the trust the power to put down payments on property and to incur debt and mortgage trust property with no guidance or oversight. Recent trust meetings have even included discussions of developing housing that doesn't meet the state definitions of affordability. In November, a member of the trust expressed concern about, quote, spending without a mission, unquote. Building affordable housing, especially with an unclear definition of what is meant by affordable, is too broad to serve as a mission to guide spending by the trust in a manner that we as citizens can be confident will be wisely done. The trust itself recognized this concern in March at the last meeting reported in the paper. There are no minutes available for this or the subsequent meeting when apparently this proposed bylaw was finalized, when they discussed including in the bylaw a requirement for select board approval of financial actions, again with the trust member stating, quote, powers need oversight, unquote. This select board oversight is not included in the bylaw before us today. In 2013, when it was still true that 5 of the 7 members of the trust were selectmen, the Mosquito reported on a discussion among trust members under the heading Selectmen Participation Critical. The chair of the trust was quoted in the article as stating that the selectmen are the people best placed to balance the town's interests. They get a lot of feedback from all quarters, and that's tremendously useful. A member of the selectmen concurred with the need for balancing the needs of the town, including schools and recreation, stating housing isn't the only priority in town. This is a greater concern today when the trust has discussed reducing the number of select board members on the trust to perhaps as few as one, with the rest being appointed, not elected by citizens. While I appreciate that the trust is grappling with these issues, and I understand the need for the trust to be able to act when opportunities arise, I believe they should have some metrics against which to assess such opportunities. No such agreed upon metrics currently exist, not even agreed upon by the members of the trust, much less the community at large. I suggest that the trust work on articulating a clear mission statement with some serious public outreach to be sure they have broad public support for whatever that mission may turn out to be, before asking the town to codify into the bylaws the broad power with limited oversight this article would grant them. Until that time, I support the amendment on the floor that will provide the oversight of town meeting approval.
Okay, thank you. I'll recognize Mr. Cruz. Anyone else who wants to be seen? I got you back there. You'll be next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Brian Cruz again, 71 Rogers Road. I just want to start by saying nothing in my amendment addresses affordable housing in town or limits the creation of affordable housing in town. It just assures that what would now be a majority unelected board does not have fiat to make decisions on that by themselves, and that town meeting has a say in it, just like it has a say over every other board's, with limited exceptions, a purchase of town property. Additionally, without this amendment, what they could do is buy property with towns that are with money is allocated to it, mortgage that property and buy more property, mortgage that property and buy more property, and mortgage that property and buy more property. There is no limit on their debt incurrence capability under the bylaws originally proposed, as long as the total debt does not exceed the total value of the land that they own. That is a big concern of mine. Additionally, the idea that there's this idea that you would lose the ability to buy certain properties because it's a time-limited issue. Towns very often, especially in the 61A, 61B process, when you're buying, designated farmland, designated forest land, the purchase and sale agreement will be contingent upon future town meeting funding. So you could do a purchase and sale agreement to say, we're going to call a special town meeting in 2 months. We will make sure we get the funding then. You can do a purchase and sale agreement that way. The idea that there's no way to do this except for an unelected body acting on their own, I just find that to be troubling. And I just want to, again, emphasize, at no point did I mention anything about affordable housing or equity or anything else that was mentioned earlier regarding the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to ensure that town meeting has control over spending. And the idea that the only way this affordable housing trust ever gets money is through community preservation appropriations is false. They could request a general appropriation at some point in the future without any specific contingencies on it for how they spend it. They just want to put it in their kitty for future spending, and then they could decide how to do it. Town meeting could appropriate that in the future. I want to make sure that with such appropriations, any real property uses of that money in the future come back to town meeting. Additionally, they could get private grant monies, and those private grant monies could be used by them without town meeting involvement whatsoever. So the idea that there's never going to be town involvement in a project that this trust exercises is just false. There's many ways in which the trust could actually create projects in town of which town meeting, with the current language of the bylaw, would have no say whatsoever. Okay? So that is all my concern is that town meeting has a say over the acquisition, mortgaging, restriction, encumbrance, sale, and abandonment of town property.
Okay, your time is up.
And if this board doesn't have a problem with it, that's fine, but that is the purpose of my amendment.
Okay. There was someone in back here. I'm sorry.
Ellen Huber, Partridge Lane, and I very much hope that this will not pass, this amendment. I think, as Kate has said, you have to have this money available in a quick manner. It's not saying for sure we're going to follow through and put this particular piece of land, and we're not going to build this or that. It's just saying this gives us the option. It's very much like what we do with conservation land. The Conservation Foundation helps to give us the option to go forward. I know that the Conservation Foundation is not a public body, but it's very similar. It allows you to react in a timely way.
Thank you. Any more debate on this amendment? One moment, I just want to see. Mr. Kissinger.
Thank you, Wayne. Kerry Kissinger at Elizabeth Ridge Road. I absolutely agree with several folks that have spoken in favor of this amendment. You know, the context is that when the trust was formed, it was totally controlled by the selectmen, who were elected officials. And this is 4 pages of a bit of housekeeping business, as this article is called, 4 pages of housekeeping business. It represents the completion of a complete change from the way we viewed how we would use CPA funds, or one of the 3 buckets that the money goes into. And who would control those funds? We felt it was very important when the trust was created that elected officials, namely the selectmen, all 5 of whom were initially on the trust. That was a very important thing in reflecting what was important to the town and what the priorities ought to be. And I can probably think of one instance where it would have been nice to be able to move a little bit quicker, even though we couldn't afford the purchase price. But it would have been nice to consider it without having to go to town meeting. I can only think of one instance of that. And you know, the bottom line here, I think, is that we're giving a totally unelected group complete authority over the funds. And there ought to be, as we hope there will be, a housing production plan. Hasn't been one since 2014. Maybe the next best step for the Housing Trust would be to fund the development of an updated housing production plan, which incorporates what we would like to do, plan to do, can do with affordable housing, either with a capital A affordable or a small a affordable, or any kind of diversity and equity issues relative to housing that we'd want to consider. So I strongly recommend that, or suggest, I will vote for this amendment. I think it's the right thing to do at this point. I would hope that we would be able to fund, and I think we're going to vote a little later to fund the Housing Trust to be able to get some help in developing a housing production plan. And once that is known to the town, then maybe we can move further along with how to spend the money. Thank you.
Mr. Ballantyne?
John Ballantyne, 268 Fifth Street. I was originally involved in setting up the Housing Authority in 1986, and I guess as I look at this amendment and the Housing Trust, there seems to be a level of distrust being communicated by this process. And I do not think we are creating Robert Moses in New York City, creating all the projects in New York City, but that seems to be what's being communicated. That has not been how the town has operated throughout these 35 years that I've been here, and most decisions go through the various boards for approval. And you know, even when we have private organizations come forward and come up with the projects like the Woodward project that is done in private, that is brought to town meeting, there's a whole process of approval. So there are checks and balances, and this idea that somehow there is some group that is going to be acting against the interests of town just seems sort of extraordinary to me. And I'm sorry that people feel that way, but that's clearly the way people feel, and I will not support this amendment.
Okay, Mr. Cruz, third and last bite at the apple, 30 seconds.
Thank you. Brian Cruz, 71 Rogers Road again. I want to address 2 points that I've just heard. One, this amendment does not in any way address the actual use of the property or the creation of projects on the property. It's only about the purchase and disposition of that property alone. The projects itself are the subject of the trust. Secondly, I heard a comparison to Concom and their ability to act and spend money to acquire property on their own without town meeting approval. That is true. Concom also, pursuant to Article 97, can't later on dispose of that property by encumbering it or selling it. That's an entirely different thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Levitan, please, since this is your second one, please keep it brief. Thank you.
Am I on? Yes, thank you. Just a couple of things. I'm going to be clear. In my mind, this is another attempt to kick the can down the road. The fact is that the state enabling legislation that we work under only requires one member of the select board. And many towns use this model because they have a commitment to actually making progress. We have a difficulty doing that, and I'll address one of the speaker's concerns that we don't seem to have a consensus. And the fact of the matter is that this group, in my mind, the Housing Trust, is an equivalent group to the Conservation Foundation, which is an independent fundraising group that can do development deals as long as they want, under no scrutiny from the town, and bring the project to town meeting. So this group, the Housing Trust, is our agent in that respect to look for opportunities and to bring plans to town meeting. The fact is, and I just want to clarify the one last thing, when I'm talking about buying and selling fixer-uppers and doing those kinds of things, this enabling legislation allows the purchase of property for the profit of the trust, not to build affordable housing, but to be able to create funding for the future. So when you put too many restrictions on things, you sort of make sure things aren't going to happen, and I urge you to vote no.
Okay, Town Council wanted to clarify one aspect, and then I think we're ready to go to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Harrington, Town Council. So by my reading of this amendment, even if the trust receives a grant or funding from CPC, they're still going to have to go to town meeting for funding. So that's a two-step vote process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we are ready for a vote. This is a vote on the amendment as proposed by Mr. Cruz. You have it in the handout. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your voting card. All those opposed? This is a majority vote. It fails to attract a majority, and I declare that it is failed. So, does anyone want to speak to the main motion as printed in the original motion handout? We ready for a vote on that? Okay, so let's go to a vote on that, and we are not in a zoning bylaw, so we're in majority vote land. Just making sure I don't screw up anything. Okay, very good. So all in favor of the proposed amendment to the general bylaws to amend the sections on the Affordable Housing Trust, please raise your voting cards. All opposed? That requires a majority. It does have a majority vote, and I declare that it passes. Okay. So now we get to return to Article 16, which is the CPA annual recommendation. This article, as in the past, is taken up in parts. And so the first is to allocate monies that are in the current Community Preservation Fund accounts to certain sub-accounts, and then the second motion will be a set of recommendations around specific projects on which that money can be expended. So, Mr. Ascolillo makes the motion under motion 1, which is at page 9 of your handout. He moves to vote that the town vote to act on the report of the Community Preservation Committee and to appropriate monies from the fiscal year 2022 Community Preservation Fund estimated revenues to the Community Preservation Fund accounts as follows: $72,107 to be appropriated to the Community Housing Reserve Fund, $72,107 to be appropriated to the Historic Reserve Fund, $72,107 to be $107 to be appropriated to the Open Space Reserve Fund, $3,000 to be appropriated for administrative expenses, and $448,679 be appropriated to the fiscal year 2022 Community Preservation Budget Reserve account. Is there a second? Mr. Ascolillo, could you please explain what we're doing here? Thank you. You can. Anyone else who needs to stand up and stretch your legs, just go ahead whenever you need to do it.
All right, hi everybody. So the 72,000 and change that, that Mr. Moderator explained, that's the 10% that we're required by law to put into each bucket. So the CPA surcharge that we get in your tax bill is about 508,000. The state match was actually pretty good this year. It's like 34%. And actually in last year it was about 27%. So it's getting better. It's been better than it has been in past years. So what we're doing is, if you do the math, all total there'll be 668,000 from the match and the surcharge. But we were a little under in that 10% last year, so we're adding that in. We're required by law. I think they do a 3-year, and if Kim is still here, she can, or Priscilla, she can explain it better. But I think they do like a 3 or a 5-year rolling average to ensure that you put that 10% in. So we're increasing the 66.8 by $5,307. That's where you get the 72, whatever the number is, 72 and change. So yeah, 10% in each bucket. The rest carries over into that reserve fund. The reserve fund can technically be used this year. However, that's what goes into the undesignated next year when the budget cycle ends. So,
thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions? Oh, and just actually, if I don't get to get up again, currently we have, if these appropriations go in, because you'll need this just to keep in mind for the next, we'll currently have 240,000 in open space, about 346,000 in historic, about 664,000 in housing, and then 1.3 million about in undesignated, and about 450,000 in the reserve. So we're pretty well funded.
Thank you. Okay, so on this one, this is the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee. Do we have a recommendation from the Select Board? It was 5-0 or 4? You voted today, okay. It was unanimous. Okay. Thank you. Does the Finance Committee Finance Committee does not take a position on this. Are there recommendations from any other town boards or committees? Okay. So we are just on motion 1 here. Any debate? This is simply on allocating the monies amongst the sub-accounts. Okay, let's move right to a vote. So this is on motion 1 of Article 16. All in favor, please raise your voting cards. You can say aye. Any opposed? Raise your voting cards. No opposition. Motion carries unanimously, and I so declare. We are now on to motion 2. Mr. Ascolillo moves motion 2 as printed in the motion handout. Is there a second? And a motion has been made and seconded. Let me explain how we're doing this. Because those of you who have been coming to a town meeting for a long time may remember how we used to do it. We adopted a bit of a change last year to make things a little bit more efficient, and we'll continue it this year. But last year was very unusual circumstances, so let me explain it again. Essentially what we're going to do is handle this the same way as the budget. I'm going to go through and just summarize each of the individual projects, the A, B, C, D, E. If you wish to have a separate discussion and vote on any of those, so this harkens back to the discussion we had on one of the prior articles about bundling versus unbundling. You have the opportunity to unbundle any votes here if you so desire. So when I go through, simply say hold if you'd like to have it separately voted on, and we will debate and discuss it separately. Any that are not held, we'll just take all those together as a package, vote them right away, get them disposed of, and then we'll move on to the other ones. Is that clear? Okay, so let me go through this now. So motion 2A would allocate $100,000 from the Community Housing Reserve Fund to the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust for the purposes stated there. Motion 2B would allocate $125,000 to be appropriated from the Community Housing Reserve Fund to the Neighborhood of Affordable Housing, NOAA, for the Benfield Farms Leaching Field Replacement Project. Motion 2C would take $25,000 and appropriate it from the Community Preservation Committee Historic Reserve Fund to the Carlisle Historical Commission for restoration of railings around the town bell in the FRS steeple. Motion, actually, I forgot to stop and ask for the holds, and nobody called me on it. Terrible. So let me go back. Does anyone want to hold on motion 2A? None. Okay, motion 2B. Any hold on that? Motion 2C, the steeple. Anyone want to hold on that? Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry?
No, sorry, for B? Yeah, the funds aren't going to NOAA. They're going to the Affordable Housing Trust.
I'm sorry, what?
No, it says in it's going to have to be.
Are you saying that the motion as printed is not correct? Okay.
Sorry, yeah, so the funds for the septic, they're not going to go directly to NOAA. They're going to go to the Affordable Housing Trust so they can supervise and monitor. So we don't want to.
So my question to you, as chair of the committee,
Yes.
is the report, it was the recommendation of the committee to give it to the trust and not to NOAA?
Yes.
And so the mistake here is a transcription error.
Did I miss?
So it was misstated in the motion, but the actual recommendation of the committee was for the funds to go to the trust.
Correct.
Okay. Town council, are we good with taking an amendment on this? Okay. So we're going to have to just deal with this one separately. So
Sorry.
that one's going to be held automatically. This Now you know why the mosquito is so heartbroken over Susan Emmons retiring as proofreader at the Mosquito. Always need a good proofreader. Okay, we will come back to that. So let me check again on 2C. I'm asking if anyone wants to hold on the discussion about the steeple project. No? Okay. 2D, sorry, is $24,000 from the Community Preservation Committee Historic Reserve Fund to the Carlisle Historical Commission for restoration of 12 antique windows of historical significance at the First Religious Society. Is there a hold on that one? No hold on 2D. And 2E is for $775,000 be appropriated from the Historic Reserve Fund and/or undesignated funds to the Carlisle Conservation Commission for the restoration of the Greeno Dam. Is there a hold on that one? Okay. So what I'd like to do now, since there was no hold on A, C, D, and E, I'd like to proceed immediately to a vote. So we're voting on all of the appropriations except for the one in B. This is a majority vote. All of those in favor, please raise your voting card. Any opposed? And that's unanimous. It passes unanimously, and I so declare. Now, Mr. Ascolillo, do you wish to amend? No, it's okay. Okay, so, but the precise wording that we have here is that instead of it being from the Community Housing Reserve Fund, we're at subparagraph B, everyone on page 10. Instead of to the Neighborhood of Affordable Housing Trust, it is going where? Please come to the microphone.
Okay. To the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust for the benefit of Neighborhood of Affordable Housing.
Okay, thank you.
You want that?
So just make sure the clerk has it. Okay, so I think we have the basic concept. Instead of going from the Community Preservation Fund directly to NOAA, first it goes to the Affordable Housing Trust, which will then, presumably with appropriate supervision, give it over to NOAA to do the project. Okay.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. So we now have to vote on this amendment. Does anyone want to debate it? Good, that was the right answer. All those in favor of the amendment? Aye. Any opposed? The amendment carries unanimously, and I so declare. We're now ready to vote on motion 2B as proposed. I'm sorry, as amended. All those in favor, please raise your voting card. Say aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously, and I so declare. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us up to Article 22, which is on page 18. Mr. Lewis, Dr. Lewis moves that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $15,000 to be expended by the Public Safety Facilities Task Force to engage a specifications and to review, assess, and develop recommendations detailing the programmatic specifications and requirements of the Carlisle Fire, Police, and Dispatch Departments, which shall include but not be limited to potential future facility needs, separate or single building, and use of the current sites or a new site or sites. Is there a second? Okay, Dr. Lewis, do you want to speak to that briefly?
This comes about because obviously our facilities are in need of some repair. We've been trying to get these done for a couple of years now. And the idea was, while we're doing this, why don't we have a whole look at what kind of facilities we might need, whether there's an advantage to combining facilities, public safety facilities. This does not involve designing a building. This is looking at what the requirements are, what the possible solutions would be, what it might cost, and really having a comprehensive look at perhaps the best way to structure our public safety facilities, and where the request is for up to $15,000 to hire professional help to help accomplish that goal.
Thank you. This has been, vote was unanimous in support from the Select Board, 4-0 to support passage of this article. FinCom, Mr. Dar, was there a recommendation?
The Finance Committee voted unanimously to support this article with the proviso that this is not an endorsement of a new building.
Thank you. Any other town boards or committees? Any debate? Mr. Ballantyne?
John Ballantyne, 268 Fisk Street. I'd first like to thank the Select Board, the FinCom, the Master Planning Committee, and I'm on the Facilities Committee, and also I'm also on the Council on Aging and the Highland Committee. This article should be looked at in the context of all the town needs going forward. And so that while this is an important part of the puzzle, it is part of the puzzle, and we have discussed this and looked at this, and if we look out 10 years, we may need up to 18,000 to 23,000 additional space for town offices, for a community center, for expansion of possible municipal housing, and that, as in current dollars, could cost up to $20 to $30 million. So while we make decisions about the police and fire, which I very much support, I think we have to look at it in the overall puzzle and think about that and realize that they're trade-offs, and we may not be able to do everything. So that is part of why we're doing the study and presenting it and looking at it as part of the overall master planning effort, which you can attend on this Thursday.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Okay, we are ready to vote. This is a vote. I'm sorry, Mr. White?
Mr. Moderator, I just heard what he said, and if I read this right, this was funding for public safety only.
That is correct. I'm sorry, you couldn't hear that? Mr. White's comment was that the motion addresses only the study for public safety needs, and it would not cover some of the broader needs that Mr. Ballantyne mentioned as a warning to you are on the horizon, but they're not included in this motion. Okay? Mr. Modell?
David Modell, Select Board. Just to clarify, you can't do that much with 15,000. So while I think both comments are correct, there needs to be a broader view of the needs of the town, as John Ballantyne remarked, but that can't really progress in a meaningful way unless the needs of the public safety are fenced or identified in such a way that that can be folded into a greater plan. So I think both Johns are correct, but for different reasons. So this, I don't view this as, they're not in conflict. The study is to identify the public safety needs, and then as a product of that, there's a broader picture of what how it fits in the overall plan.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we are ready to move to a vote on Article 22, $15,000 for professional assistance on doing a programmatic specifications and requirements study for public safety. All in favor, please raise your voting cards, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay, and voting card up. We have motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. We're on to Article 23. which is the adoption of a classification and compensation plan. Ms. Reed moves that the town vote to adopt the Town of Carlisle, Massachusetts FY 2022 classification and compensation plan as printed in the motion handout. Is there a second? We have a second. Ms. Reed, did you want to speak to this?
Oops. We were always supposed to be doing this. We just found that out. This is what we pay our employees. There is one little mistake on this sheet, however, on the classification, the jobs under the classification. The assistant treasurer collector should have been listed under grade 6. So that's just a job that we forgot to include. But if you then turn over, you can see what the various grades get paid. This is something that you will be seeing every year now.
So, Ms. Reed, let me just be clear here. What was the one that was left off?
Assistant treasurer.
Assistant treasurer under grade 6. Okay, I'll take that as a motion to amend the main motion by adding the assistant treasurer under grade 6. Is there a second to that amendment? Any debate? All in favor, please raise your voting cards. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The motion is now amended. Okay. Any debate on or questions on the motion as amended? Okay, seeing none, we are ready to proceed to a vote. This is for the adoption of this salary and wage table as printed and amended. All in favor, please raise your voting cards. Say aye. Any opposed, nay, and lift your voting cards. Motion carries unanimously, and I so declare. We are on to Article 24. Dr. Lewis, increased town share of employee medical insurance premiums. Moves that the town vote to accept the provisions of Section 7A of Chapter 32B of the general laws, so that in addition to the payment of 50% of a premium for contributory group life and health insurance for employees in the service of the town and their dependents, the town shall pay a subsidiary or additional rate of 5%, increasing the town share of the premium to 55%. Is there a second? Second. Okay, Dr. Lewis, do you want to speak to that? You can use this microphone up here.
When we negotiated some of the contracts last year, one of the issues raised was the percentage of health benefits that the town pays for. We looked at across all the towns in our area, and we are relatively low compared to most of them. Some pay up to 75%, but the most pay less than that. And at the same time, the Insurance Advisory Committee renegotiated our health plan, changing it from the current one that we were under up until now to one where, in fact, it's a little bit cheaper for the town. So the money became available where we could do this without undue additional expense to the town. Given that many of our town employees are not highly paid, and where health expenses continue to increase, we thought it was appropriate that we take on a greater share of the health care benefits and raise our percentage to 55% and reducing theirs to 45%. So that was the rationale, and that's what we're proposing.
Thank you. The recommendation from the Select Board was 4-0 in favor. The recommendation from the Finance Committee was unanimous in opposition. Are there any other town boards or committees that had recommendations on this? Mr. Dar, did you, or anyone else from the Finance Committee, did you want to explain your position?
Well, we understand the point that Mr. Lewis made about the cost of health insurance, but health insurance, as we all know, is a huge expense. 5% last year by itself would have been $90,000 additional for the town. We feel that, in some ways you open a Pandora's box here and has long-term economic impact. Now, as it happens, as a finance committee, we weren't asked our opinion on this during this process. And so this is our one chance to express our concern about the long-term impact of changing the percentage split.
Thank you. Any other comments from the floor on Article 24? Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Kablotsky.
Question for Dr. Lewis. Under the present scheme where the town pays 50% of health insurance, have we had any difficulty attracting and retaining talent? Thank you.
The answer to some degree is yes, but I don't know quantitatively, I don't know what that would be. But certainly we are not competitive with a number of the towns around. And when you look at our salary scale, which is similar to what other towns pay, our employees pay relatively more.
Mr. Kissinger.
Thank you. Just a note about mathematics. Mr. Dar said earlier that this year's budget is going from 2.4 to 3.6%, and it's really a nominal increase. The mathematics of that is going from 2.4 to 3.6 is a 50% increase. That's a 50% increase in the percentage. Now, the last 10 years, our taxes have gone up about what, Kate, 25, 30%? They're now at 15,000 and change. At 2%, which is what we've been at, they'll go off another 25, 30%, and we'll all be spending $19,000 or $20,000 by 2030, 31. Now, if that is 3.6% instead of 2.4, you do the math. These little changes without, as Jim says, looking at the future and the impact of that mean a lot. These numbers mean a lot. And I only bring it up because on this thing that we're voting on 5% increase. Everybody get that for the benefits and the health insurance premiums, 5%? Well, 5% on 50% is 10%. We're voting for a 10% increase, not a 5% increase as it said in the mosquito, as it says in this motion. The math is incorrect. Sorry, it is. 5% on 50% is 10% increase. Now, we can call it 5% till we're blue in the face. Maybe we don't even need to change the warrant because everybody understands that 5% is 5%, not 10%. But I just want to encourage us to be more critical, think more critically about the future impacts of these decisions that we're making on the fly without having anybody tell us what the future impact of these decisions will be. We're sort of left to look ahead 12 months at a time and left to make decisions on that basis. So it's a plea for better math. It's a plea for better view of what all these decisions mean in the future. Thank you.
Dr. Lewis?
Well, there's math and then there's math. We do a 2% increase in a salary of $100,000. That's a lot of money. A 5% increase on the health benefit of $6,000 or $7,000 is a lot less money. So while percentages are fun to play with, we really need to talk about the number of dollars that are involved with this. To a person making $65,000 a year or $40,000 a year, that 5% is a fair amount of money on a $7,000 or $8,000 health insurance bill. We don't take any qualms at all when we give everybody in town a 2% raise that are making $70, $80, $90, $100,000 a year. Those dollars are a whole lot more. In this case, we're trying to give a small benefit to employees who don't make all that much money so that they feel a little better about working for our town.
Thank you. Mr. DeCock?
Jonathan DeCock, 130 Oak Knoll Road. I just want to point out that our town employees are extremely important to us. And I want to particularly call out the DPW guys, right? They get our roads plowed. They're at the dump all the time. They're doing a fabulous job. And often as a town, we don't recognize the importance of the work that they do, right? And so I think, if you look at this from a private employer's point of view, they often have to pay substantially more than 50-50 in order to attract employees. I think this is the least we can do to reward our very valuable employees for the hard work that they do. Thank you.
No applause. Okay, any other comments? Mr. Dar.
I just want to clarify that our other concern was adopting Section 7A. If this were just a straight-up vote, one-time vote on 55-45, it would be something different. But now we're adopting a state law that empowers future select boards to do whatever they want regarding the split.
Thank you. Chief Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chief Fisher. I can tell you that I've talked to our lowest paid employees at the Public Safety Division about this probably as much as any single thing. The amount of money that our dispatchers are spending for their health insurance has caused a lot of consternation. And I can tell you we absolutely have lost people over the years, and it's a difficult discussion when we're hiring new folks on board. And I would appreciate folks' indulgence on this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Kissinger? And I know you'll keep it brief.
Oh, I'm sorry. Kerry Kissinger, I'm not suggesting that you vote against this 5%, which is really 10%. I'm just saying, let's understand what we're doing in the process. And we mentioned a 2% cost of living increase. The way the kickers and the longevity increases and the other increases are baked into our contracts, a 2% cost of living increase translates to 3% increase in costs for wages. So we just need to be a lot more crisp, I think, in terms of how we express these things and how we understand them and what they mean to us in the future. I'm not saying don't vote 5%, which is really 10% for the folks. I'm saying let's know what we're doing. And okay, no, that's enough said.
Good. I think we're ready for a vote. Okay. Not to disagree with Mr. Kissinger, but just to make sure we're all clear. So the proposal is to authorize Section 7, accept the provisions of Section 7A of the general laws, and then in connection with that, the contribution to health premiums would go up from a 50% contribution to a 55%, which is an absolute increase of 5%, which, as Mr. Kissinger correctly points out, is a relative increase of 10%. So we're good on the math. All in favor, please raise your voting cards. It's a majority vote. Say aye. Any opposed? Raise your voting cards. Say nay. Motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. We have now reached the end of this longest, hottest meeting outdoors, and I would just, before we end the meeting, no one's in that much of a hurry, I can't believe it. I'd just like to remind everyone, please put your masks on as you're moving about and leaving. I'd like to thank all of you for coming, even thank you more for staying. Thanks to all the town employees, officials, boards, committees who put in many, many, many hours of work to get us here. A very special thanks to our police and fire departments. They certainly carried the water for us today. And also thanks to the Carlisle Public Schools for their special assistance. Reminder, you've got master plan discussion this Thursday evening, town election on Tuesday, June 22nd. Drop off your volunteer forms on the way out. And I will now entertain a motion to dissolve this 2021 annual town meeting. Is there a second? Okay, and you may now all vote with your feet by moving to one of our local establishments. May I suggest Great Brook Farm Ice Cream, Kimball Farm Ice Cream, or the patio at Fern's?
I love your humbleness.
Thank you.
I don't know what he said, but it may be the same thing. I think you have the patience of a saint.
Oh, he congratulated me on being humble. Oh, thank you. Thank you.